It's 5 o'clock and I'd like to call the April 10th, 2025 work session of the Staunton City Council to order. I will now entertain a motion to approve the work session and regular meeting agendas.
Madam Mayor,
Sir,
I move to approve the work session and regular meeting agendas as presented.
thank you, Councilor Overholzer. Is there a second? A second. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Kesker, will you call the roll?
Mr. Campbell. Aye. Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Overholzer.
Aye.
Ms. Park.
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd. Aye. Vice Mayor Arrowood. Aye. Mayor Edwards.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you so much. First up is a joint work session between the Staunton City School Board and the Staunton City Council to discuss the FY26 school board budget. Madam Chair, would you like to convene the meeting?
Yes, we'll call this school board meeting to order.
Thank you. And Councilor Campbell, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor Edwards. Appreciate everyone getting together again. To talk about our second joint meeting between school board and city council. I met with Dr. Smith and Chairwoman Dr. Siegel last week just to kind of talk about ideas for this joint work session. And we thought it'd be a good idea to have city staff do a high-level overview of some of the highlights of this year's budget under consideration. And then also for the benefit of everyone in the room, I certainly didn't know anything about it, the specifics, but our funding formula we have in place between the city and the schools. I thought that would be good information for everyone, especially because we should probably talk about it and revisit it and make sure it's meeting everyone's needs, on a regular basis. So I think Jesse's has a couple of slides after the budget highlights that kind of goes into the details of the funding formula. So Jesse, I'll turn it to you.
Okay. So the total proposed budget for the city of Staunton, including all funds, is a little over $164 million, which is a 15.4%, $15.4 million increase, which is a little over 10%. I'm going to walk you through why that's such a high number, because it might shock you at first. The general fund is 79.6 million of that, which represents an 8.31% increase. So the 10.4% can be a little bit misleading because it includes capital expenditure projects that are in our water fund and sewer fund and stormwater. And those can vary greatly from year to year. So about 5% of that 10.4 is related to those infrastructure projects. 2.2% is attributed to schools, and that is double counted because it shows once in our general fund and then it's transferred into the education fund. So transfers like that between funds are double counted and can make it look a little bigger than it is. 2% increase in state and federal funding. Most of that is related to the VDOT reimbursable funds or the Department of Social Services and CSA, which is the Children's Services Act funds. And then the remaining 1.2 are all other operating increases. So I'm going to concentrate on the general fund because that's the one that gets the most attention. That is where the tax dollars go in the other local taxes. So the proposed budget has a tax rate of 91 cents in addition to the assessment increases. Real estate tax revenue, about an increase of 4.5 million. Personal property tax rate is the same at $2.90. That's $278,000 increase. Other local taxes, there were no room to move sales and lodging taxes up. Meals tax, we are able to increase by about $90,000. They continue to perform strong. And business license tax revenue is increasing by $100,000. Now, the state funding that I talked about a minute ago, these are restricted. They tie directly to specific line items in the budget. So they're not available for use for anything else. That is the $1.1 million for the VDOT reimbursable funds and $513,000 for the Children's Services Act. And then recovered cost. This is our first year in 10 years that we do not have the jail buy-in money from Rockingham County and Harrisonburg City. They bought into our jail about 10, 11 years ago. And last year or FY25 is the last year of that payment. And so now we do not have that operating revenue in our budget. So as I said, The budget is at a 91 cent tax rate. And the extra 2 cents is for the infrastructure for the city, with the focus being on the tunnels that run under the wharf. We don't know yet how much the repair to those tunnels will be. It's a big unknown for us. And we're trying to create some flexibility and room in the budget to respond to that. The next couple slides are going to tell you where every dollar of that general fund increase is going. The largest share is $1.6 million for the schools. That's a 9.55 increase, which is the school funding formula. And the majority of that is the second half of the 2023 assessment increases. That's why that number is bigger than what it is, because there were some pretty large assessment increases in 2023. The $657,000 for capital improvement funding, that is that equals 2 cents on our real estate rate. Juvenile and Domestic Relations Courthouse. As you know, we had to separate out from Augusta County and do our own courthouse. We have additional expenditures in the FY26 budget related to this separation. There's one full-time and one part-time sheriff deputy, one full-time and one part-time custodian, and then about $97,000 of operating expenditures. Most of that's utilities with some operating supplies. About $1.1 million of this increase is going to salaries and benefits for city employees. There is a scheduled 3% cost of living increase on July 1st for all full-time and part-time employees. The state has designated a 1.5% bonus for constitutional officers and their staff. There will be some of that we have to pick up for the employees in those offices that are not state employees. 10% increase on health insurance due to high claims, almost 202,000. And then unfreezing one traffic position that was frozen in 2023 to fund a $3 an hour increase for public works. Other expenditures are increasing about 304,000 across the city. 76,000 of that is because we're expanding the real estate tax relief for elderly and disabled and increasing the budget for the veterans relief too. 16,500 for the replace the K9 unit. The Staunton business website, that is one that we're still debating, so that may stay or may not. And then 174,000 across all other city departments. It does not represent a very big increase as far as operations go. So this year we saw significant increases for outside agencies and saw partnerships of almost $1 million. The biggest of that is in the Department of Social Services and the Children's Services Act. With our local portion of that, $281,000. Our animal shelter expenditures are going up 68%, which is 119, and that's due to our usage of the shelter going up. And there's additional expenditures in there because they're moving to Verona to a bigger space, and they'll still have their old space until we can sell it. Valley Community Services Board, last year they requested a 62% increase. We kind of capped them at a 10% increase last year. This year we are fully funding our share, but it takes $137,000 to do that. One of the reasons we want to do that because in the state budget, the state recommended that if localities are not doing their required 10% match, then the state's going to claw back funding because they will not supplant local funds. So we are trying to do our full 10% match. Middle River Regional Jail, up 1.3%. Our usage there went down, which is helping that, about $44,000. And then we have some smaller ones, Office on Youth, Health Department, SCDA, and the Children's Advocacy Center. VDOT reimbursable funds, that is funded with state money. That's the restricted money that I talked about earlier. That can only be used for eligible activities. So in this budget, what you don't see are all the requests that were denied. There are $1.5 million of new positions requested or enhancements to comp plans, particularly for the police department. There are $2.4 million in operational and equipment expenditures that were not approved. There were 146,000 of outside agencies that we had 6 new agencies apply for funding, and we did not fund any new agencies, at least in the proposed budget. Some of that is still in discussion too. We budget for 300,000 of attrition savings upfront. We pull almost $1 million from the debt service sinking fund balance, because the general fund transfer does not fund the whole debt payment at this time. And then most of our CIP funding will depend on having carryover funds instead of being funded directly out of the general fund. So in schools, the transfer will be $18.9 million, which is an increase of about 1.65. The school board budget, it's proposed now. I don't believe school board would be adopting that until Monday.
Right.
It's proposed at 51.4 million. In the outstanding general fund debt, about 42.3 million of that is school related. And this is a slide that I just wanted to share with everybody. The separation of the juvenile and domestic relations court has been a really big deal for Staunton. That is about almost $2.3 million worth of expenses we've had to absorb in the last 2 budget cycles. Where before it used to cost us $64,000 to be part of that courthouse. So that is something that has really hurt us. 1.6 of that is the debt service on that courthouse. A little over $500,000 is the sheriff's department annual budget, with 2 positions requested there remaining unfunded, and 6 new vehicles that he requested remain unfunded. Building maintenance, which is custodians, is $167,000. Like I said, we did fund 1 full-time and 1 part-time. They had asked for a second full-time. Right now that remains unfunded. And then utilities and cleaning supplies. Everything else in that courthouse will be state funded. The judges, the clerk's office. So the next 2 slides deal with the funding formula for schools. The funding formula was signed in August of 2022. And our first budget that we used that funding formula in was the FY24 budget. And it's based on audited data on the 2 prior fiscal years. It takes 26.559% of the property taxes, which are basically your real estate and your personal property. It does back out the downtown tax because we are just a pass-through for that tax and it goes straight to the SBDA. So over a 2 years time, 53.118% of real estate and personal property taxes end up in the school's budget. Other local taxes, meals, sales, and occupancy tax, which is the lodging tax, are not included in the school's funding formula because there are EDA and tourism agreements related to those. And that's a little over 12% for over 2 years for those. So in 2024, the increase was a little over 900,000 or 6%. That was the first year of the formula. FY25, it was almost 1.3 billion at an 8% increase. And that was the first half of those 2023 assessment increases. And 2026, this year is 1.6, which is the second half of those 2023 assessment increases. And the next slide just shows you how it is calculated. So 2026's contribution was based on 2024 and 2023 audited figures, where this year's 2025 was 2022 and 2023. Just showing you how it uses those 2 years to average out. This slide just shows you all school-related funding that comes out of the general fund, the local contribution, the schools, the city capital funds. That's a transfer from our general fund into your capital fund. There was an increase requested there in the proposed budget. 100,000 of that is for building maintenance. 50,000 is city helping with the school bus replacement. Schools put in 100,000, we put in 50. I think the goal was to replace 1 bus a year. And then the other 20,000 is paving. There's quite a few paving projects in the plan, and the 20,000 was needed to keep the fund from going negative. And then city funded debt service. There was a small drop between 25 and 26. That was the city's share of a 2005 bond that was refunded in 2021. And then this, a little hard to read, is the amortization schedule for the debt. This is the school share, the city share. This is the school share. You'll see we do have a drop coming in between 29 and 30. That is a literary loan. I believe it was McSwain and Ware.
Right.
Those two schools had a renovation, 2005. Is that right, Dr. Smith? I believe so.
I think that sounds
And
right.
so that is, that was refunded as part of the 2021 debt. That 2021 refund, it kept the original amortization schedule for all these different debts that were rolled into it. So that's when that drops off, and the city will have its crossing debt drop off between 28 and 29. So there will be some relief coming in the next 4 years. So I want to talk about the CIP funding and the similarities between city and schools. Unfortunately, both of these CIP plans rely heavily on carryover being available, and not much of our operating budget is being put toward our capital infrastructure expenditures. We have aging infrastructure on both sides with lots of needs. There are large unfunded projects, and the plans tend to be a little reactive instead of proactive. What is the biggest emergency that we need to take care of right now, instead of being a little more forward thinking? So the school unfunded projects are a little over $48 million. FY 26 is the Shelburne Collaborative Space, the ask of 7.5 million. And then we have the Shenandoah Valley Center for Advanced Learning for phase 2, and then next year, phase 3.
We talked about that a
Yeah,
little bit.
go ahead.
So I don't know if everybody is aware, but the, it's now the Shenandoah Valley Center for Advanced Learning. So that's both VCTC and the Governor's School under one umbrella. That's what the name of it is now. And the MOU's from the 1960s. And it is signed by the mayor of Staunton, the mayor of Waynesboro, the chair of the Board of Supervisors of the county, plus all 3 school board chairs. So this MOU is an agreement between not just the school divisions, but also the municipalities. And so we did, all 3 school divisions voted to move forward with phase 1A, and phase 1A has been going well and is nearing completion. The other phases of renovation that they want to do at that building have not been approved yet. But there is there's been some initial discussion about revisiting that MOU. And I think by revisiting that MOU, I mean, a lot's changed since the 1960s, obviously. But by revisiting that MOU, my hope is that we'll find a win-win-win for all 3 localities that'll make sense. And we'll find a pathway to try to get to these numbers. I know that right now, with some new legislation for the school construction grants, regional programs are now allowed to apply. So they are preparing to apply for one of those grants as well.
Okay, and then as we move out into 2029, it is my hope that in the next few years, the funding for the track bathroom and storage building will become more apparent, that there'll be balances available in the building maintenance reserve that could help with that, but at this point, it's unfunded. Chromebook replacements, maybe there'll be some grants that could help with that, maybe some T-bond, we don't know, but as of right now, we would run out of that reserve funding in 2029, and then the operations facility as a placeholder out there as a need for the schools. City unfunded capital, a little over 134 million. The biggest items in our general fund being the need for the 3 stations. They have outgrown the basement of City Hall. Fire station number 1 redesign or design and construction, and fire station 2 adding on to that building there. Those 3 remain unfunded. Frontier Drive improvements, 10.3 million. And then streetscape projects that were put into the CIP a few years ago, 24 million, those remain unfunded. The next three are in our enterprise funds, the North River Pipeline. It's a 100-year-old pipeline that is still performing well, but reaching the end of its life. That's a huge water project that we don't have the funding for at this point, but we do need to keep our eye on that one. And then just locating a new raw water source. State Urban's hope that one day we can have a third source, just for redundancy's sake. And then parking lot garage improvements, that fund is not performing well enough to fund the capital improvements there. So there's a $3 million unfunded there. And then the big unknown are the tunnels that run under the streets and parking lots. And that is all I had to talk about.
You said the FY 26 funding formula is FY 23, FY 24.
Yes.
Okay. I was just looking at for any school board members that are interested, if you go to PDF page 82 of the city budget, there's a good chart of general property tax year over year. So next year we anticipate pretty much same school funding levels because FY 25 is approximately the same as FY 23, but we will see another increase for schools with this year's regardless of.
When I did some very early projections, so don't hold me to this, it was about $1.2 million for next year, but that will ultimately depend on where council lands on property tax rate.
Okay.
Any questions? Did anybody have questions?
This escaped me.
You think of a question later?
I have
you know
two
how
more
to find
sessions
us.
with you, so.
Yeah, don't worry. We got a long night tonight.
Yes, we do.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment more than anything. And I just wanted to thank you for this because, it's good for us to review the funding formula and we hadn't since its inception. So thank you for putting that together. And I just wanted to, send our gratitude to you for kind of your studying all of the needs and kind of your forward thinking and foresight for our community, our schools, just realizing that we're going to have needs down the road and thinking about these ways that we can bring in the revenue that we need to start thinking about those things. So thank you. I really appreciate all of this.
Oh, I thought of it. The new name of the governor's school facility there. Is that project both? Is it more just facility upkeep with the age of the building, or is it to expand programs offered? A little bit of both.
Mostly the former.
Okay.
And we put in, I think we put in a PA system. We had to upgrade some like fire alarm system security the first time around. There were some HVAC that needed to be done and those kinds of things. Some of the other ones are now, like the other phases are some expansion. But as far as the first phase, it was really renovation and major systems.
Is that facility exclusively for the governor's school program, or does it get some shared use by other?
The Valley Career and Technical Center is also housed in that building. And they do adult learning in the evenings.
Oh, I was wondering about the Evers property. How's that coming along? How far are you guys?
Still in negotiations. So
Negotiations
as far as discuss that.
whether you're doing, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, if there's no other questions. I think we're
And-
now.
And outlook on federal funding.
I knew someone was gonna say something. I mean, it's kind of just a day by day thing for us. I mean, it's, there's right now, there's no change. But there's a proposed change to the House budget proposal. I can't remember, but that might change our community eligibility provision. So that's gonna potentially change our qualification for the free meals that we give to all our students. But none of it is a done deal. So right now, nothing's changed.
Okay.
but so we can't project what's going to happen. We just know that there's things down the line that we're probably gonna have to deal with as they come. It doesn't give you a good
Yeah, we
answer.
feel the same way. We're also in the same
Right.
boat for
Right.
different
Yeah.
reasons, and it's kind of, it is day by day or week by week that we hear news about something else that has happened or that, could happen. So it's about one of the most difficult budgets we've ever put together, that I put together in my career probably, for that reason.
I just saw some good news about funding for food coming from the State House. And
From the state,
that was
maybe.
approved for funding for food banks.
Hmm.
And for providing food for not only colleges and schools. That it was in the House bill that just passed and Youngkin signed it. So it wasn't tied at all to school lunches, but it was tied to college.
Okay.
Ours is a federal provision for the free.
There was no
Greenhouse.
state funding involved in that.
There's
Okay.
funding, but not.
So with that question, will y'all be able to still provide the school lunches like for the summer? Will that still be able
It's up in
to?
the air.
Yeah, right now,
It's up
nothing's
in the air, too.
changed.
But you're still on track to provide it.
The board's gonna get an update from Amanda Warren, our school nutrition director, in our work session on Monday night, if anybody's interested.
Okay.
It's at 5. To the public.
When we're, like you mentioned, the MOUs, like, when would those discussions be taking place to redo it? Because when I last was looking into it, isn't it split, like, we have 25%, but our students only make up 13% of the
Yeah,
population?
we're
so-
on the hook for 25% of the capital cost. That's right.
Right.
And 12-13% is about right.
Yeah, so when would that go for? I mean, it seems like that would hopefully, before we're obligated to this phase 2, to like, hopefully like rework those
Well, I mean,
numbers.
I've been pushing to go back to that for several years, and I think we finally, now we're finally at the point where I think the other school divisions are ready to also enter into that.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know the answer. Like I said, very preliminary discussions. It's time to revisit it.
So maybe turn it over now. I think Chairwoman Siegel is gonna give some updates on state level that are maybe a little more known at this point.
Right. Sure, I wanted to give a couple updates on the General Assembly and what's happening there that affects schools. As a lot of you probably know, last year we were really in favor of a 1 cent sales tax that could benefit school construction. It would, take a lot of the load off of some of our CIP requests. It got vetoed last year and unfortunately again was vetoed. The governor did make some concessions and put in the budget a $50 million additional amount for grants. However, just as an example, Albemarle County, if they were able to use that 1 cent sales tax for construction, would be able to raise $25 million on their own. So the $30 million that's been allotted really won't go very far. We've tried and been denied once and we're assuming twice
Is it going into
the
the
grant.
same grant program, just expanding?
I
or is it additional
believe-
The criteria hasn't changed.
Yeah, I don't
It's-
think
yeah.
it's
But it's
any
just going
different.
into that additional
Into
money in
that
that same
pot,
grant? Okay.
Yeah. So that's that, but the Youngkin sent down a budget amendment recommending eliminating $200 million from the conference report budget that would have helped to lift the support cap. And one of the JLARC 2023 recommendations is additional state funds to get rid of the support cap, which has been in place since 2020. Am I right about that?
The
No, I'm
support
sorry,
cap-
2000.
2008.
Sorry.
2008.
Okay. And so because he basically wanted to get rid of that in order to fund $300 million in state reserves to try to maybe deal with some of the federal employees that have been terminated. And but that amendment was fully rejected by the General Assembly, sent back to his desk. So we're just hoping that there will be some good news when he finally gets around to signing that budget. But we don't really know. We're just all in limbo with that as well. But that's all I had for General Assembly updates, but does anyone have any questions? Just before I turn it over. Okay, and I know Dr. Smith wanted to just give some updates on our student achievements.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight some student and staff successes since taxpayers are listening and they want a good return on their investment. So we've had quite a nice run here the past few months, and I just wanted to share a few of those things. So Karen Grady, a first grade teacher at Ware Elementary, was named the Region 5 Teacher of the Year. Region 5 is made up of 20 school divisions, including Albemarle, Charlottesville, Harrisonburg, Rockingham, Lynchburg. And so that is the fourth time in the past 6 years that a Staunton City Schools teacher has been named Region 5 Teacher of the Year. So it's kind of like, Dr. Siegel doesn't like when I say it's kind of like the Chiefs. We've kind of got a dynasty going on. Region 5 Teacher of the Year. Last week, 3 Staunton City Schools educators were recognized as Dauburn Award recipients. 10 are recognized in each year in the Saw area. It's like the Heisman Trophy for local teachers. The winners for us are John Wilson, band director at Staunton High, Stacy Mooneyham, CTE teacher at Shelburne, and Tyson Thompson, a PE teacher at Ware Elementary. So that also comes with $10,000. So that's part of the recognition. So that, we're very proud of all of them. It was really fun to celebrate that. Just last week, we were able to go to our elementary schools and have some stand-up surprise faculty meetings at the end of the day to talk about our achievement in reading in grades kindergarten through 2nd grade. We have a goal that all students in our, in our strategic plan, we have a goal that all students are reading on grade level by the end of 2nd grade, and we're making huge progress. So of the 72 school divisions in the comprehensive instructional program of which we're a part, that's out of 130 school divisions. These are all high performing school divisions. Our first graders ranked first among all divisions in increasing the number of students reading on grade level.
Wow.
And all the kindergarten through 2nd grades are in the top 1/3 of all divisions. And then overall K through 3, Staunton City Schools ranks 3rd among all divisions in increasing the scaled score performance for students. And we are one of 5 school divisions that they're going to do a feature story on. It's called Success Stories for Literacy. So Staunton City Schools will be featured on that. So it's really nice for our primary teachers, because this time of year you're talking about, the testing grades all the time. So it's really nice to give the primary teachers a boost going into testing season, and they're feeling very proud of themselves. It's what they control. It was a measure of where our students were at the start of the year and where they are mid-year, and the progress we've made. The students and staff has been tremendous. So we're really proud of that. And we're going to do a story on that ourselves, aren't we, Ms. Haskins? For the first time, Staunton City Schools was selected as a recipient of a 2025 Top Employers for Interns Award. And that's for our commitment to providing work-based learning opportunities for students through internship offerings. And that comes from the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia. Just this week, we had students enter the National Civics Bee. And 4 of the top 5 finishers in the regional civics bee were Shelburne students, and 2 advanced to the state competition. So that's a big deal for us. In our music program, we've had some exceptional achievements. At Staunton High, both symphonic and concert bands received excellent and superior ratings. 12 students, all district choir, 9 students, all district band, 9 students, Valley Honor Band, and 1 student in the all district jazz band. Shelburne also is having extraordinary success. 7th and 8th grade bands received superior ratings at the state assessment, earning the title of a Virginia Program of Honor. Last week, our high school Family Career and Community Leaders of America, FCCLA, state competition. We had 11 state medalists and 5 are going to the national competition. Out of athletics, we're off to a roaring start in spring sports, but I do want to mention our basketball team went undefeated in the district for the 2nd year in a row. Coach Madden is our coach of the year. And we also had the player of the year, Joaquin Bell. So two years in a row undefeated in basketball. And then we just had an Envirothon competition with Shelburne. Today, we just found out last year was the first time we ever participated. We won it. This year is our 2nd year, a lot more schools and school divisions involved. And we just won it again. We just found out today. So We're getting sick of all the squinting, but we're trying, we're trying to cope with
That's
it.
very good. No, that's really. Dr. Smith, I just wanted to point out why that grade level reading is so important. And if I can remember the research correctly, and I might be wrong, is if you're not at grade level by second grade, you're going to struggle to catch up and you're going to you're never going to actually catch up. And this becomes far more difficult when you get to high school, because when you're in high school, everything is reading based. And then that reading comprehension isn't there. And then you just aren't as successful in high school. So to catch them by second grade, that just sounds like a great statistic, but it's the basis for the success of students throughout their school career. So
And you could really see that students and small children engaging in the science of reading and picking apart words and recognizing things and telling what they notice. It's really fantastic to watch if anyone ever wants to go see it.
very sorry that we only have, well, we're a little bit over, but thank you, school board, for joining us. Glad we could meet again in this room. But we are going to have to take a break and go into council chambers. Madam Chair, would you like to adjourn your meeting?
Yeah, the school board meeting's adjourned.
Thank you. So we'll now break, and if you don't mind scurrying over to the dais and. All right, everybody, we're moving on to item 3. Everyone, we're moving on to item 3, the FY 2026 work session. Ms. Beauregard?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Okay, so Ms. Moyers and I are gonna tag team this again. I'm gonna kick us off and then I'm gonna let her take over. And what we're gonna try to do tonight is we're gonna address the questions you had. We do have an order of things. And then at the end, we'll have a slide to kind of figure out where we are. And then we can talk about if we need an additional work session before the 24th. So just kind of keep that in mind as we get through these slides. Okay. Okay, so here's kind of our order. We're gonna talk about tax rates. You had all asked questions about that last time we met. We're gonna talk about capital improvement program reserves. We're gonna talk about COLA and some regional comparisons, revisit outside nonprofit agencies, and then discuss some very specific issues about departmental budgets. Okay, so next slide. So just to remind everybody, yes, the budget was proposed at 91 cents. And the reason for this is to address the critical infrastructure issues that we have happening directly outside this window here, as far as the tunnels and the wharf. And I'm sorry that these next 4 slides, we're gonna see like 3 times tonight, but I think it's really important to actually see what we're talking about here. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So here's some pictures that Wiley Wilson provided to us. This is directly under Johnson Street. And sorry, the little red circle at the top, you'll see it better if you actually can pull it off our website and look at it. So you can see this does not look good. And I'm going to go through these quickly because Mr. Hart is going to, when he has the tunnel update, we'll show these again. Here's another section below the wharf and Byers Street. So this is another section we're going to talk about during the tunnel update. This is directly under the road. Here's the section that's kind of in the middle of the wharf. This is why the entrance to the wharf is closed down. This is just severe delamination of the concrete. And the next picture is also that same section, and you can see it actually seems to bow. If you can look at the water, and then you can see how the concrete is bowing. So I just want to stress that this is really the reason that we wanted to provide City Council with flexibility as far as how this will be addressed. We do not know how much this will cost. You will not know how much this will cost when this budget is approved in a couple of weeks. So that's, for me, this has been keeping me up at night, frankly. And then we find out that FEMA has announced the end of a significant grant, which could have potentially helped. It seems like the new administration's focus is going to be on response and recovery rather than reducing hazards and protecting communities in advance. So that should be very concerning. I believe this will mean that the flexibility and of outside sources is not going to get any better.
and it's already gotten worse, frankly. And so we just need to keep an eye on this, and we're doing our best to be looking for grants to address the needs now and any needs in the future. But I do want to go back to the tax rate for a minute, but you can stay on that. Yeah, you can go to the slide. And before Jesse, yeah, perfect. Before I turn it over to Jesse, I just want to say that I understand that it is a large increase with the assessment, and I do understand that. I just want council to remember and the community to remember that you did increase the tax relief programs this year. So remember that that was approved, a $50,000 income and $80,000 in assets for elderly, disabled, and veterans. And so the folks that need this the most should be able to qualify for tax relief. And not only would that mean that people, when the Social Security increases occur, they don't get kicked out or they don't lose qualification, it would mean that more people would qualify. So we've done our best to kind of mitigate that piece, to say, making sure the most vulnerable in our city who really can't afford it would be able to at least qualify for tax relief and have an avenue to be able to. So I just wanted to remind folks about that is also in the budget, and to try to help kind of mitigate the increase for some of our folks. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Moyers. She's going to kind of walk through the rest of the PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, please pop up and we'll be happy to answer them as we go along.
So the real estate tax rate has been one of the main focuses on this budget, but it's only one of the data points. I will be walking you through several revenue sources for the city that were asked about last week and how we compare with those rates. So our proposed rate is 91 cents. I have listed other localities around us ranging from 77 cents all the way up to $1.22. Waynesboro's proposed budget is at 89 cents. They will not adopt until May, so you will not know what that is by the time we adopt. The mean is about 94 cents among Virginia cities, and the median is about 92. So I was asked about the meals tax rate last week. Staunton's is at 7%. And as you see, we're among one of the highest meals tax rates, other than two other cities in the state of Virginia that are at 8 and 10 cents. So there's not a lot of room to move here and remain competitive in the meals, prepared meals sector. But each percent, just for your information, would bring $950,000. The lodging tax rate, 6.7% for the city of Staunton. As you can see, our neighboring cities range anywhere from 6 to 9%. And tourism does receive, I believe, 2.7% of that 6.7%. In the box to the right there, increasing to 7% would bring an additional $57,281. Going up to 8% would bring an additional $248,000. Sales, meals, and lodging, I just wanted to show you with those three things combined, which makes up the largest portion of our other tax. We bring in about $14 million in total for those three categories based on our 2026 proposed budget. Personal property tax rates, we have one of the lowest in Virginia. I believe there are maybe 4 other cities lower than we are, but you'll see that some of those have higher real estate tax rates. We are currently at $2.90. Where neighboring cities range anywhere from $3.25 to $4.80. The average among cities is $3.71, and the median is $3.60. Increasing Staunton's rate to $3.25 would equal another $773,000 of revenue, and going to the median, $3.60 would be $1.5 million.
Jesse, just so everyone's aware though, because we talked about it earlier,
Mhm.
unfortunately, like for this budget process, it's too late at this point to raise any, like the personal property tax rate if we brought it in line. Is that correct? Because it would push back the budget.
Yeah, it
and stuff.
requires a public hearing, which is a 7-day notice, and then you can't vote on it for 7 days after the public hearing. So technically you could have a public hearing next week, but then, and then you would, which is when, I'm sorry, in 2 weeks, which is when the budget is supposed to be adopted, which would essentially just delay the approval of the budget. So that's really the outcome, is the budget would be delayed. And we'd have to publicize the public hearing. We'd have to get that into the paper by Monday.
So this, where did the PDF go? The PDF that I inserted.
Sorry, technical difficulty, but this is fine.
So this, the bottom got cut off of this PDF, but it shows that Staunton is in the bottom 25th percentile for the real estate tax rate and the personal property tax rate. So the next slide, it takes into account water, sewer, and trash expenditures on a bi-monthly, every 2-month bill, and then over an annual basis. And you'll see that Staunton has pretty affordable water and sewer rates, about $164 every 2 months for a typical family of 4 at 9,000 gallons for that cycle. So the next slide just brings all 3 of those together: the real estate, the personal property, and the utility costs on an annual basis, using our median house value and personal property value of about $30,000 and our average usage on a 2-month cycle of 9,000 gallons of water. And once you do the math, Staunton is a very affordable city compared to other cities around us: Charlottesville, Lexington, Winchester, Harrisonburg, and Waynesboro. And these are all at the current tax rates and utility rates. Next slide. So moving on to CIP funding and reserves, being at the bottom of those tax rates and utility rates, where it hurts us is saving for our infrastructure and being able to put money back into our CIP. So according to our financial management policy, it's recommended that a minimum of 2.5% of our general fund budget, minus the transfer to debt in schools, should be put into our CIP fund. Currently, our 25 budget is about 1.7%, which is the contribution to the Uniontown, West End, and library funds. The proposed budget, which adds the 2 cents for the infrastructure, we would be at 2.76%. So CIP reserves, they allow us to save for a larger project. And I will walk you through some of the reserves that we currently have in our CIP and talk a little bit about what we're saving for. And just as a reminder, interest is earned on those funds that are sitting in the CIP, with most of it invested in the Virginia investment pool, earning a little over 4%, about 4.4%. And that council has the discretion at any time, as needs change, to move money between CIP projects. For public safety, we currently have 3 reserves there: fire truck reserve, the self-contained breathing apparatuses, and the cardiac monitors. Those are 3 reserves that we've been giving to each year to save up for those replacements. And then there was a fire station #1 improvements reserve that was started many years back, and then it kind of just sat there for a little bit. And so we're recommending that we kind of restart putting money into that in hopes that we can renovate fire station #1 when we are able to save enough money. And then a new reserve that we're recommending is to start funding what we're calling phase 1 of the police department relocation, so that when we have the funds accumulated in a parcel of land or an opportunity comes available, we can act on that. Public Works, we have an ineligible parking reserve. So most of our paving in the city is done with VDOT reimbursable maintenance funds. But this is money that's set aside for things that do not qualify for those funds. And this would be a street, maybe a narrow street that doesn't meet the qualifications of an eligible street. Or it could be when a repair is made to a water or sewer line, and we have to repair the paving where we dug down to get that out. Those are not eligible for VDOT reimbursement funds. Public Works Equipment Fund, that is to replace large piece of equipment, usually pieces that cost in excess of $100,000. Public Works Building Maintenance Fund, that is a reserve that we use to fund roof replacements, HVAC replacements, large things like that. Adaptive Traffic Control, that is one that we saved for the last 5 years, I believe it is. That is one that if council wanted to redirect that somewhere else, that is one that could be available. That those traffic control units were ultimately bought with VDOT reimbursable funds because they were eligible signal lights. And
Yeah,
Can you
could you explain what they do?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
functionally, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I wish somebody from Public Works was here because.
Yeah,
I
Mr.
don't
Irvin
know.
is here. Do you, would you be able to, I think I recall, isn't it when they're, that it's a timing?
I think it's
issue,
a
is that
timing
right?
thing,
It's a
but I
timing thing, yeah.
cannot speak to that.
But Mr. Irvin is here. Thank you so much.
And I'm not the transportation guy, but
but-
you've seen in the county where there'll be traffic lights or elsewhere, there's the flashing yellow arrow. That's an example of an adaptive traffic control. And we would love to have that. We have an opportunity to do that at several of our signals in the city, just to help the traffic flow better. Not that we have a huge rush hour, but it would help people transport, through the city. But that's just one example. Probably the most apparent example.
It's dynamic and adjusts based on sensors.
Yes, it's a combination of the timing, that a lot of our signals, we have like 48 signalized intersections. About half of those have some form of adaptive control now. For instance, the ones all along Richmond Avenue, they are set to be timed to improve the traffic flow through Richmond and Greenville. But some of our other intersections, signalized intersections, could benefit from the turning yellow arrow, that type of thing.
Yeah. Anyone else from Mr. Irvin? Thank you, sir.
And then the final reserve is the one that is being proposed this year with the 2 cents on the real estate tax rate. And that was for infrastructure repairs and improvements. In the community development area, we have sidewalk reserve, which was started in 2014. The brick sidewalk, which is no longer funded annually, has $200,000 in it. And these will be used for the I believe it's Churchville Avenue streetscape. Greenways reserve, bike and pedestrian, the West End revitalization, Uniontown, and then there's a new reserve being proposed for the housing.
Ms. Moyer,
Mhm.
the sidewalk reserve at the top, is that's specifically for new sidewalks? Isn't there a separate fund for sidewalk repair, or does that cover both?
This is only for new sidewalks. Sidewalk repair would come out of VDOT maintenance money if it was on an eligible street. And if it was not on an eligible street, we would have to find other funding. But this is for new sidewalks. And currently, the West End and the Uniontown are the only two that are funded from a general fund transfer. All others depend on having carryover funds to fund them that year.
Remind me, what was the $117,000 expenditure on Uniontown?
Mostly surveys.
Okay, so we have a separate line item for the surveys and the CIP. That's what I was confused about.
Source is the Uniontown reserve for that, right?
Yeah.
That's just the expenditure, but the sources is the Uniontown reserve for
Yes.
that. So
The
it's
source
just,
of funding should be the CIP reserves.
yeah.
Okay,
So it's not double,
Can we-
it's
can
not a
we-
separate item.
can we clarify that in this?
Yeah,
Does it have a revenue source? I mean,
Yeah, it says CIP reserve under this, but. And it's on other as the expenditure, so it's just hard to know what the expenditure was.
So next is Recreation, Parks, Library and Culture. There is a public library improvement fund that was started in FY '24 from a general, that is a general fund transfer. The Parks and Rec Public Use Facilities Fund started in 2024, originally started as the Moxie Fund, but was since renamed. That is also where we are currently putting interest earned in the CIP. And then there are two new proposed reserves for Parks and Rec equipment. Very similar to the Public Works Equipment Fund, because a lot of times we cannot fund their equipment in the operating budget. And so we're hoping that we can set up this reserve and fund it with carryover funds so that they can replace some of their older dump trucks, wood chippers, stump grinders, things like that. And then the golf cart replacement reserve that was requested in 2022's or 2026's proposed budget. Next is the general fund. There is one reserve there for large IT equipment pieces, like servers and things like that. So a question came up during one of the sessions about COLAs for other area localities. Stanton city employees is currently scheduled to get a 3% COLA. The Stanton City Schools is 4% COLA and 5% if they're above step 19, I believe it is. And there's a potential bonus for teachers Stanton Schools. Augusta County is a 4% merit and COLA. Harrisonburg is 4%. Waynesboro's proposed budget has a living wage adjustment valued at $2.6 million. And then the state of Virginia, their base COLA was a 3%, with many receiving either a $1,000 bonus or a 1.5% bonus.
So I'm sorry, Ms. Moyer, you said that Harrisonburg has a 3% and I'm not sure I understood that, a merit?
Augusta County has a 3% COLA and a 1% merit, so it's 4%.
And so they have a merit structure that obviously not everyone gets it. They have to.
I don't know a lot about
Okay,
their structure.
but
That was just what
but
was in their
Stanton doesn't
proposed
have-
budget.
Presumably, it's based on employee evaluations.
right.
But no, we currently do not have merit pay.
Thank you.
So next slide talks about the living wage, which is getting a lot of attention from businesses and localities moving toward the living wage concept, which means that the wage that a full-time worker must earn on an hourly basis to help cover the cost of the family's minimum basic needs. Some companies and localities are voluntarily going to this this living wage amount. And you can download specific like by your locality. And this is just a snippet of Stanton's.
And the reason we're bringing this up is because Waynesboro, this is the model they're going to be using starting next year. And it should be concerning for us because we compete directly with Waynesboro for positions. And so we will have to keep an eye on this. And we are constantly bumping up against each other, especially in public safety salaries. And so that's why we're bringing this to your attention, not to say there's a lot we can do about it in this FY26, but as we go into future fiscal years, if whatever Waynesboro does end up adopting as their budget, they've just gotten started, we'll have to just kind of pay attention to it because it could significantly affect how we're able to recruit and retain employees. So that's why we're bringing it to your attention.
So the 2.6 million that Waynesboro proposes to bring it up to a living wage, what does that amount to as a percentage of their overall payroll? Do you know?
I do not know, no. It's kind of lumped all in there, one section.
So if I remember, their current minimum wage for a full-time employee is $14.33 and it's going up to like over $16. And which is quite an increase. I don't know what the percentage is, but that also means that they're making compression adjustments in between all the layers. So everybody probably is getting a bump.
And they're not doing 100% of living wage. It's about 87%.
But they have a plan to go to, I think, $19 and I can't remember. They do have a multi-year plan to kind of get to that point.
Okay. Next slide is the outside agency request, the unfunded amount of 167,365. Majority of that are the 6 new agencies that have asked for funding in this year's budget that remain unfunded at this point. So next slide, the question came up about golf, because the budgeted revenues for golf were 310. The direct budget expenditures for golf are 161. And why can the difference be used toward the golf carts? And that's because the golf is part of the general fund. It does not operate as its own enterprise fund. And so the difference in the revenue stays in the general fund, and it helps cover for some of the overhead costs that are not picked up in the golf expenditures, like the maintenance of the course and their share of just general city expenditures. So the economic development website, we have looked into that a little more, and staff would support an alternative proposal of using $11,000 in this budget for content creation and to use the current platform for the actual website itself. And so that would reduce that ask from 39 to 11, saving 28,000.
Is that one-time content creation or would it be on an ongoing basis?
I'm not sure. Do you know?
I think the original ask was the 40 and then 5 a year to keep up
Yeah, I
the
think-
website, so.
But if we stay with our current platform, we would not need that 5 additional a year. So that we'd have to get that answer for you on the content creation. And then the grant coordinator position, that's not recommended at this time. It is a decentralized process with many department staff and directors doing their own grant applications. And then we do receive assistance from the PDC as needed. And we have a couple new staff members coming on board that can help with applying for grants.
So this is kind of our final slide, and then we kind of are gonna open it up to city council discussion and questions. So it seems like these are the main discussion points at this point, is the real estate tax rate. If you all do decide not to, that you don't want to adopt a budget with 91 cents, what does that look like? The question of the grants position, outside agency funding, it's been tied to your $50,000 fund that you have currently. As far as funding some of those outside agencies. And then we have a discussion about city department items. We did just have a proposal about the website, which would reduce cost, and we'll have to answer the question about the content, but that does reduce the cost for next year. And then any other item, question mark. And as I said, when we started, if we don't feel like we're at a point at the end of this work session that we feel like there's still some wrap up that needs to happen before the 24th, then if you all are open to it, we could have a work session. The proposal would be next Thursday after planning commission. So it would be kind of late, but we've done that before. And so we could certainly entertain having one more work session before the 24th.
I have a quick question, Jesse. Like the increase from 6.7 for the lodging tax to 7%, which is the same as Harrisonburg's, and I think the lowest besides Waynesboro. It was like a revenue of $57,281. Does that account, is that purely the city's take, or does that account for like, because I know tourism gets as part of that? And so is the 57?
Tourism is, they're set at the 2.7 of the 6.7, so it would just be city funds.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So in the separate document that was compiled about grant support now and how that's being managed, you're saying some of the new positions that are being hired have grant
Yes.
seeking capability. And so I guess, can you quantify or can you say a little bit more about how our grant seeking capability would be enhanced without hiring a dedicated?
This is hard to quantify that right now. These are fairly new staff members who are still getting their feet wet in their jobs. And one that we haven't even hired yet. So what I would like to propose is, we do have a vacant position, I understand. So if we would just like to see how this goes in terms of not having a dedicated position for this, and put a new focus on finding grants. And I feel like that's already kind of started. I mean, we put the build grant together with the assistance of the Planning District Commission. A lot of staff were involved in that. So I feel like if we can put a new focus on this and really put attention to it and dedicate more staff time to this effort internally, then I feel like we can actually make a dent in this. The question is, what are the grant sources and how are those going to change over time? And so maybe that's another reason to kind of wait to see if a new position would be something to actually invest in, given kind of the status of federal funding, potentially state funding. So, but I think we definitely need to, I'm very much dedicated to having staff put a focus on this, and that's my commitment. And I hope that we can demonstrate that. That is my goal, at least, but we can reevaluate it down the road and see how it's going to.
Well, part of that, I hope, would be actually tracking how much money is coming in from grant sources and tracking that on a fiscal year.
Oh, we
basis.
do that as well.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely through,
Yeah,
that-
that would be
that's
helpful to
finance.
even see, like. what's
I
a-
thought I
what-
put that in the attachments that I sent you
Oh,
all.
yeah.
It's in there. Yeah, there's
Okay.
a file in there that.
Is there a 3 or 5 year trend line to see?
How difficult would that be?
It looks like
It's
it's just for
available.
the last.
Yeah, it
fiscal
would,
year.
we could see about putting something together. Some of the grants are going to look the same, obviously. Something like Gardner Springs is going to be a large bump because obviously that's a special one-time grant that we received for that project. But many of those grants, like the equipment grants, victim witness, Blue Ridge Court Services, obviously is 100% grant funded. Those are always coming through every year. Will stay the same for the most part. So we can see if we can get some trend data. But that's what we would like to try rather than hiring a new position at this time.
One of the challenges with this is, the grants come from various sources and there's a different logic and there's different strategy for each. They're public, they're private sources. And one thing that a dedicated position can do is to prospect for additional sources and to cultivate additional sources, to proactively cultivate relationships with granting agencies and potentially individuals even, or businesses that would represent new sources of revenue. So I see what you're trying to do to have a cost-effective approach to this and see how it goes. I have a little concern that it doesn't represent as proactive approach, and that we wouldn't be digging up as many additional potential sources as we could with a dedicated position.
Know that we're also running into issues in the finance department, being able to administer and report on all the grants. HUD was added a few years back. We have the crossing grants, the Gardner Spring grants. We do all the grants for Blue Ridge Court Services. So it's becoming a capacity issue there too, with all the reporting and administration.
There's a lot of administration involved in tracking the progress of it, keeping up
Yes.
with when you apply for a grant and once you get it, you well know keeping up with it to ensure that you're meeting the standards that they expect and demand to continue to receive the funding and meet the standards that they expect is a difficult process.
Especially on the federal funds.
Yes.
Including HUD and the federal funds that we received from the Gardner Springs project.
Yes, and we just attended a seminar, and the person, it was the Homeland Security seminar, and the person who approved those grants was talking about these communities that send in grants applications, and that they can tell that they are the grants that are submitted that are not done by a professional grant writer versus or a specialist that does grant writing. They want to give them to the communities, but the grants are not, they're so highly specific. They have to be done on a specific paper. They have to be done in a specific format. And if they're not done exactly the way that they're supposed to, they can't be granted. Pardon the pun. But they, and he said it's frustrating because these communities, he wants to give them the money, but the agency submitted grant, the professional hired one, was they have to give them the money because it was done the correct way versus. So I think the efficiency is a good idea, but I'm still in favor of someone dedicated to the position. As Counselor Overholzer said, that I think someone dedicated full-time to seeking out and finding sources and cultivating relationships with agencies is a good idea. If that's their sole purpose.
I hear two of you support it. Can I hear from a few others to see where we are?
My thoughts are, in addition to the administration of the grant, from a financial standpoint, tracking and making sure you meet all the deliverables, there's also the project to be delivered. That takes additional resources. I know our city engineer has his hands full right now with just what we have on our plate. Hopefully he's getting some help soon, but that's another big thing to take into consideration. I would almost rather, if we're going to add staff resources, I would almost rather put them where we're going to deliver the projects that the grants are associated with. I think that's a bigger need because we have known grants right now that we don't take advantage of every year just because we don't have the resources. Not from not knowing about it, but from not being able to deliver any more projects.
Can you give an example, Counselor Campbell, of staff of what you're saying? That there are things that are being left on the table because we don't have.
In terms of specific grants?
In terms of delivering a
Certain
project.
transportation grants that we've had success with in the past, but we don't take full advantage of.
So you're saying if we had a specific person to go after those?
Well, I think, we've
Concentrate
been
on-
actively trying to find an assistant city engineer for some time, so hopefully that will help out a lot with the actual delivery of these type of projects.
Not a grant position. You're saying not a grant position.
I personally see the need more as assistance to deliver the projects we receive grants on, not identifying the
Gotcha.
grants. I think there are other options, as Ms. Moyer and Ms. Beauregard have said, about opportunities to partner with regional agencies to do more from a grant writing and submission standpoint.
One concern has been that people wouldn't have the time, or whatever you want to call it, the bandwidth within the execution of their regular duties to pursue specific grants on that. But also leaning towards CSPDC and other regional organizations as well, as long as we're partnering more effectively with them. I think in the past, there's been at least the perception that we haven't pursued aggressively enough partnerships with them. And maybe it's been more so in the past. I don't know. I guess I take your point about, like, if we can't deliver it, if we don't have full staffing in the departments to move forward with it too, but then it's a balance, isn't it?
Ms.
Right.
Beauregard, can you describe a little bit more what you said? It's a very decentralized process. How many
Right,
grants?
so
Can you
we
describe
don't
that?
have one person writing grants, so each department takes responsibility and they have
Mhm.
staff, and they might have a named staff member who does it.
Mhm.
Or in some agencies in the city, it's whoever has expertise in a certain area. And then they are responsible for writing it. Sometimes they find it, a grant, you know, for equipment, for instance, or things like that. So it just depends on the department, and the larger departments probably have a couple people that do it. For instance, Ms. Johnson in tourism has pursued 3 grants this year, and she's, you know, a very small office, but she's been able to be very good at that. And so that's an example of staff we've hired who know what to go and look for and then are pursuing it. So yeah, it just depends on the department, but everybody kind of does it a little bit differently. It becomes centralized when it hits finance, of course, because
Right.
they're responsible for making sure everything is reported properly and
Right.
and everything is done properly on that end.
Yeah, I personally, I really appreciate the paperwork you put together showing how it works across the departments and how everybody's playing their part in the grant writing. I share the concern with, especially just for this year, because so much is unknown with federal monies and what even grants might still be around. It seems to me like I would rather possibly take that, just use it somewhere else than fund a position for a grant writer when we just don't know what even is happening this year, But I do like the idea of going forward, and it also ties into what Adam was saying, even with what's happening now and just not being able to deliver it, we can maybe, fine tune our thoughts on this and where money would be best be spent.
It sounds to me it might be a subject that could be discussed over the following year. Where such a position might fit in, under what department? Would it just be in the city manager's office? How would this person be supervised? How would they work with each department? You don't want to shoehorn I'm one of the people who really wanted to see this happen, but I also don't want to see something happen just to happen. To have something shoehorned into the local government without an obvious place for it to fit, without a real plan for how it would be successful. So if this could be an ongoing conversation to see if it is something that would benefit departments in whatever way that looks like, whether it's with reporting and administration, or I think I would lean a bit more that way, particularly if we're looking at making harder financial decisions. Anyone else?
I think in discussions with,
Yeah.
probably you've already had with other localities about if there's a position like this and
Yeah.
what are their duties and how do they interact with the other
Yeah.
grant seeking staff and departments? Is it more, how much of the responsibility is the administrative overhead? Shepard has described how much of it is taking initiative and finding new sources. Sort of how does it work in getting a sense of comfort with that? And if we agree to track this year over year, also, I think that's quite important.
Yeah, we're kind of running lower on time. I would like to just go back to this adaptive traffic control. It says it's currently funded with carryover, the $720,000. Is this is a set amount, or is this something that's being added to every year? Or is this something that's just waiting to be implemented?
It's no longer being added to, this was the last year of it.
Okay, so it is just a lump sum that's saying they're waiting to be implemented.
The equipment has been purchased, but it was
Mhm.
purchased with other funds. It was purchased with our VDOT reimbursable fund balance last year.
Questions? Since there aren't any questions, I'll just push on with the fire truck reserve. I recall, I think of the first year we were on council, so 3 budgets ago, we had approved ARPA funds to purchase 2 new fire trucks. And I remember that the timeline was about 7 years that we would be waiting on those 2 new fire trucks. Is that right?
Three?
No,
3 years?
3.
Okay, I don't know where I got 7, but 3 years. So is this is funds that are just, we're continuing to put in so that when the current one needs to be decommissioned, They just roll over.
It would be ordered in FY 27 and probably delivered in 29 or
Great.
30.
Terrific.
So just to give you an example though, of why that's
Yeah.
necessary, remember the one that was in a wreck? That's still
Yeah.
not ready. And they're
Right.
borrowing one, I believe, from
Right.
Rockingham County. So it's very, at any given time, they can be down
Yeah.
an apparatus. And so, and in that case, it was because of an accident,
Right.
but these things take a while. And so when that's the environment you're working in,
Hmm.
it's important to kind of have those
Have to
reserves
have
in
your truck.
place.
Perfect. So that should be here in,
Well, we gotta
Yeah.
pay the bill by the end of 26,
Okay.
because that's ARPA money.
right.
Yeah, I think last I heard it might be a little ahead of schedule.
With a big red bow. Questions? All righty.
I mean, I guess I'm
Mr.
still,
Oberholzer, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, the big question sort of looming over all this is the real estate tax rate. And I'd still like to see a scenario where we could preserve, where we could fund at the existing tax rate. I guess the obvious place to remove is under the scenario that you've created at the 91 cent rate is additional capital funding to cover the wharf area. I guess what we're doing, the 3 cents that we're now allocating for the Uniontown Library, West End, some portion of that could be redirected. I just wonder if they're, going kind of line by line. I see things in the budget like, 55,000 for to purchase plants and to manage them. 20,000 for dues, for professional organization dues and memberships just for library and recreation alone. So those aren't huge amounts, but in a tough year where we're facing significant extra costs, both for the courthouse and potentially very likely for the underground tunnel issues, to go through and selectively maybe pair, if perhaps not all, but maybe a portion of some of those things. Perhaps there are opportunities to.
I'm just gonna ask straight up, who would like us to prepare something at 89 cents to show you next week?
I'd like to see that, certainly. One thought on like the repairs that end up being, Wharf and Johnson Street there. Now, we have, it also has to do with our borrowing ability for something of that magnitude as well. And now, what year was it? Was it 28, 29 that?
Stanton Crossing falls off.
No.
Oh,
Well, I guess Stanton Crossing was also Ware and McSwain from their renovations too. That's coming off.
30, 31.
Just to remind you, we are paying our courthouse debt using savings so that when we get to the point where they fall off,
Oh, that'll be picked up by that.
yes.
Lovely.
So there could be some capacity, but I would not count on the whole entire thing.
Okay.
And just to be clear on the debt capacity, I mean, we have plenty of capacity. It's just
Yes, we do.
additional revenue to pay the additional debt. So
Exactly.
the 2 cents here could be converted to,
A debt payment.
yes.
Right.
So when you're looking for me to prepare an 89 cents budget, the only flexibility I see is the CIP unless you want me to go to departments and cut out flowers and trees from horticulture. I mean, is that what you want me to do?
I'm personally comfortable after, understanding more the needs we face now and the future and the data you all just provided, comparing us to other municipalities. I'm comfortable at 91 cents. We're talking $4 a month at the median.
At the median $250,000 household. Having just looked at our needs, our infrastructure needs that were something above $134 million, I think. I don't even know what the timeline for that is, but we just looked at that with school board unfunded infrastructure projects, which were astronomical. I mean, astronomical. It is truly unimaginable how we would pay for $134 million worth of infrastructure projects on top of all the other needs. It is a struggle to consider raising the tax rate again after an increase 2 years ago and an increase in the assessed value of homes in Staunton. At the same time, we want our city to not crumble beneath our feet. We want our buildings to not crumble over our heads. We want the fire department to get its renovations. It's the police department to get a new location. And that's the responsibility, is to make sure those things happen. As difficult as that is. At the same time, Staunton is becoming a more expensive place to live. For everyone. And that is true for every locality, certainly. I would also like to bring up with you all the $50,000 council fund that we established last year during our previous council. This was brought up. This was established as at council's discretion to provide monies to people in crisis situations or to nonprofits. And as a discretionary fund, I think we should look at funding some of the outside agencies that did not get funding in this proposed budget. The ones that were new, understandably, it was the ones that were new that didn't receive funding, were New Directions, the Worm Shelter, Arrow Project, and the YMCA. Those are the human services agencies that did not receive funding. The Arcadia Project was not granted funding either. That is not a human services agency that is sort of in the same category. And I'm wondering if anyone has thoughts on that.
I'm in favor of using all that money for outside agency requests, not necessarily equally dividing it among the new unfunded requests, but using all of it and possibly supplementing it with other sources to be determined.
It's the intent of
I don't
that
wanna take-
fund, but I
I don't want to,
I
I have ideas, but
I
Adam.
mean, I can absolutely support that, but I think for me, I think it needs to be a one-time support, given the uncertainty that a lot of these organizations are currently facing.
Agreed.
You know, our human services support for our community flows through our state and regional partners and agencies. And you can see that with the significant increase that we're giving to the Valley Community Services Board this year. So, while, I mean, all these organizations provide tremendous benefits for the city and the surrounding region, but I would be cautious of doing, expectations of an annual contribution.
Some of them I think are intended to be one-time requests, but you're right, others maybe there's an expectation not. And so, but I agree with you. We should set an expectation that this would be a one-time.
And they're reevaluated every year anyway. There's a grant deadline
Yes.
and they're reevaluated every year. So
And hopefully
think
with the
that's an
good news
expectation.
of Harrisonburg, Rockingham, United Way expanding, that will hopefully help.
But that is something that we can discuss and kind of work out later, because the $50,000 is there, correct, Jesse? Like,
Mhm.
and so we don't have to decide the parameters of the division of that part right now. So maybe we could come up with some criteria and stuff. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of other stuff talk about quickly.
Yes, we have about 4 minutes left in this work session.
So, my suggestion is that we do have another, work session. You brought us a lot of information that now, it might change things the way that we looked at it in the beginning. Our city needs a lot of things done to it. I mean, and then there's a lot of unknowns out there too. We never know from what year to what year or for what 6 months to 6 months, what will happen with anything that's falling apart. Do we have those funds available and ready to use? As we see now, we don't know how much the wharf is going to cost. Where is the funding going to come from? So if we go ahead and take what we can now and put it there so that we benefit to use it, then we wouldn't have to pull from nowhere else. I still feel for me that the 1 cent that we are putting aside for those 3 agents, those 3 resources, that we could like put a halt on those for this budget and then resurface them and look at them again for the next budget cycle. That is the only way that I feel that we can get some more revenue to fund projects that we need without cutting out any more, because it says city departments, items, question mark, website, question mark, any other item, question mark. So that means we want to go and dig into the budget and pull out nickel and dime. We can't do that. We need to have it where it's going to be a set amount that's going to benefit to something.
That's true. There's also that 1.17 that has not been specifically allocated for the
Right.
sale property and Stanton Crossing. So that's definitely something we want to discuss. And going to 0.91 is not, it doesn't sound that bad. 89 is the lowest it has ever been. But, between the 2 years before and this time, it's been, for your average house, a 43% increase in value. That's a heavy hit. It's not much per month, as you pointed, but I mean, that's, apparently my house is above average. But that's something to look at.
Well, it means about a $30 a month increase for
Yeah. So,
a person in a median.
And I don't want, I said that, just comparing a $4 between the 2 cents a
Yeah,
month.
right.
I mean, I certainly don't want to indicate that, and it is a huge jump that we've experienced in the past 4 years. While the tax rate might be the lowest it's ever been at 89, I mean, we've gone from $20 million to $30 million in 4 years from real estate tax collected.
yeah, so it's not the same amount of money that we're looking at a percentage of. It's all, moving on that. So, I mean, we have to look at what that percentage would indicate. So, I mean, it's 43% has outstripped inflation by far.
But I mean, I
over
think
that
this
period.
speaks volumes, and I want to commend you all for putting this
Yeah,
information.
Yeah,
in.
Terrific
absolutely,
approach.
absolutely. And I mean, we're definitely behind on some other funds. I mean, like the comparison shows that even at 0.77, you pay 8% more for the median same
Yeah.
price house in Waynesboro. So that shows that everything else is higher in a lot of these other.
I mean, it's the most public,
communities.
I feel like it's the most public facing tax, the real
Yes.
estate tax, but it's only a part of the
It's
full picture of.
Right.
So you mentioned going through budgets, and I just want to remind you that I did go through every department's budget and
Yeah.
and repurposed $430,000 that I saw that they weren't using to fund things that did increase, like utilities have increased, electric costs have increased, to put them there. So there's not going to be much that we can squeeze out of there unless we stop doing things like we stop purchasing flowers and putting them out, things like that. I don't know if there's much I can squeeze out of the budgets without
Mhm.
taking something away that gets funded now. So.
Just looking, again, I know that sale of the property sale, the 1.2 or the just about 1.2. It's one-time revenue. It would not go to operating expenses. It needs to go toward, either toward the wharf or toward other infrastructure projects. I'm just wondering if there are any one-time needs that could come out of that are currently not funded?
Equipment, et cetera, that kind of thing.
Just to look at that.
From the
I realize that has to go toward the future repair of the wharf toward, yeah,
From the EDA.
from the EDA sale.
I mean, I would like just to make it clear to all of you that, I mean, there's are small budget items, but as an economic development revenue, I have no problem putting it back into economic development. And I see both. If we do the full website update, I think it should be considered coming from that since that's an economic development
Right.
expense. And I would also, someone just said Arcadia is not a human services request.
Right.
To me, it's an economic development request, and I would fully support doing the $30,000 request to them out of that fund.
Right.
Yeah,
It makes more sense to come out of an economic development windfall, so to speak, and to fund it that way, as it will be a one-time
Well,
grant.
we talked about grant writer. If we want to secure a $1.5 million existing grant,
Yeah.
That's money well spent, in my opinion.
I definitely would like to have another work session for
Yeah,
sure.
we're,
Especially because playing with the numbers and stuff. I mean, I would love to be able to keep the rate at 0.89%, 89 cents. And I mean, if we don't have to have a strict, if it just pushes it out a week, and I know that maybe nobody wants to hear it. But if I was doing a lot of stuff with the numbers, and if we just bring our property tax rate up to the lowest of, like, make it equal with Waynesboro at 325, that's an extra $773,000 in revenue a year. And so that means we could fully fund the police department career development plan. I mean, that is weighing heavy on my heart. The police department here, we have a really good police department, and we need to be able to attract and keep the best of the best here in Stanton. I think that's really important. And then it would even leave us, if we add in the, it leaves us 389,688 that we could put towards as infrastructure reserve fund for just the infrastructure in general. And that way people are only looking, I did the math, if a $15,000, your car was assessed at $15,000, that's an extra $52 a year, which I think is much better than an extra $30 to $50 a month for the taxes, if we did the real estate tax.
Terrific.
We need to know
It's time to-
tonight
yeah.
if you want to do that, because
Yeah.
we have to
Let's do it.
advertise a public hearing.
Okay, I think we should go
Yeah.
ahead.
For
and
the
let's-
extra
It
work
sounds like,
session, I'm all
sounds
for
like we
that.
need to do that.
That's fine.
And it's actually
Talking
time
about
to,
increasing the property tax.
And
I'm just looking at Mr. Blair. Is that,
I guess the question is, are you talking about April the 24th, the council meeting, having the public hearing?
We-
However, we legally need to make it happen to where we can post and then talk about it.
Because
um,
this statute states we have to get 7-day news. So I doubt that could be heard by next Thursday.
if we get it in tomorrow, we should be able to get it advertised.
When?
Okay.
guess-
Thursday.
It would next Thursday, the 17th.
But there has to be 7 days between the time it's advertised and the public hearing.
The pub- All right.
So
Would it be rain on Wednesday, the 16th?
for the 24th.
Yeah,
right.
for the 24th. If we ran
Right.
it on the 16th.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get at. Are you talking
Mm.
about the 24th having the public hearing for the personal property?
That's what
tax?
they're suggesting.
Okay.
Then
just
if
wanted
we
to be
ran the ad
sure.
on the 16th, that would be.
We would
fine.
have time,
Yeah.
yes.
And so if we get an ad in the
We have
paper,
to.
if we get them a draft tomorrow,
Yeah.
they should be able to publish it by next Wednesday.
We would hope.
We would have time. And then the budget
Alrighty.
adoption would not occur on the 24th. It would
Right.
be delayed the next meeting after that.
Well, that's.
So is that
Alright.
what we're hearing?
I think that's what we're hearing.
and
We're
at
going
least give us
to-
The option.
That's it, but everybody.
I'm sorry, I know
Everybody's
nobody
in
wants to keep
agreement.
doing budgets for another
Um,
week, but I think it might be worth it.
Okay.
I agree on the budget next week. I'd like to look more at the raising the property tax and see what the But anyway, but that's okay. But I would like to, we're going to move on to our final work session item, which is a public hearing, a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel for legal advice related to establishment of a special tax district and the potential disposition of publicly held real property bordering Peck Street. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move to enter a closed meeting for one, the discussion of potential disposition of real property bordering Peck Street, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the city of Staunton pursuant to Virginia Code 2-2-37.11A3. And two, consultation with legal counsel from the city attorney for legal advice related to establishment of a special tax district pursuant to Virginia Code 2-2-3711A8.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Kesker, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Ms. Park,
Aye.
Mr. Overholzer,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Arrowood.
Aye.
Mayor Edwards.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Kesker. We will reconvene at 7 o'clock. I hope to see you all here for the regular meeting. I will now entertain a motion to reconvene in an open meeting.
Madam Mayor,
Counselor Woods,
I move that council reconvene in an open meeting and certify to the best of each member's knowledge that only lawfully exempted public business matters were discussed and that only public business matters as identified in the closed meeting motion were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting.
Second.
thank you for that. Any further discussion? Mr. Kesker, please call the roll.
Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Overholzer,
Aye.
Ms. Park,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Arrowood.
Aye.
Mayor Edwards.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Kesker. The work session is now adjourned. It's now 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the April 10th, 2025 regular meeting of the Staunton City Council to order. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here this evening. Tonight's invocation comes to us from Councilwoman Woods.
Madam Mayor, I have invited my pastor from First Church of God in Christ, Pastor Ronald Watson, to do the invocation tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Pastor.
Good evening. Let us pray. Gracious and eternal God, our Father, we pray for a spirit of unity and understanding and compassion this day as we undertake and deliberate the work of the city. We pray that, Father, you would grace us with the ability to hear, grace us as we speak, give us wisdom and guidance that's necessary to conduct the business of the city. We pray that, Father, you would allow justice to reign and that the citizens of this city would receive the justice and the blessing of the Lord as we continue the work of God. These blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Pastor Watson. All righty. Some exciting news. Last week, several of us from council and many of the staff attended the groundbreaking of the new Wawa on Richmond Road. It was very, very well attended. The new staff, the new general manager was there for the store. They're talking about hiring starting in the fall. So hoping to hire a lot of folks locally. And so that was a terrific event. Following that groundbreaking, Councilor Woods and Vice Mayor Arrowood and I attended a ribbon cutting at a new business out on Morris Mill Road, just off West Beverly. It's called Safe Storage 365, and it's just off West Beverly. Clean, new, modern storage facility. I highly recommend you go check them out. And one reminder from last week, there is a senior health fair tomorrow at Gypsy Hill Park Gym. It is from 9 o'clock in the morning to 1 p.m. And it is specifically targeted for seniors, and you will find tables with health information, with social information, all types of activities and information. So I hope many of you will go. Any other items from members of City Council?
I would mention, not only did we have shovels at Wawa, but we had a lot of great food. Wawa also showed up with Wally and a check for $2,500 for Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, which
Yes.
I thought was fantastic.
That's terrific. You're right. They are apparently a very generous business. So thank you for remembering that. All righty, with no other items to share, I will move on to the consent agenda. For procedure memorandum number 14, it's the policy of City Council to have routine, non-controversial items placed on a consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be voted on in one motion. If separate discussion of an item is requested by any member of council, that item shall be removed and considered separately at the end of the regular meeting agenda. Do any council members wish to remove any items from the consent agenda to be placed at the end of the regular meeting agenda for separate consideration? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Airwood.
For a second.
And is there any further discussion? Mr. Kesker, please call the roll.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd. Aye. Mr. Campbell,
Aye.
Mr. Overholzer,
Aye.
Ms. Park,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Arrowood,
Aye.
Mayor Edwards.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is item B, a public hearing of an ordinance to establish a budget for fiscal year 2026. Ms. Beauregard. Oh, there you are. Thank you. Ms. Beauregard.
I guess we'll just start here. Hi, good evening again. I'm going to kick this off, and then Ms. Moyers is going to take over the rest of the PowerPoint. We'll try to go through this quickly, but for the benefit of those who haven't heard the budget presentation or didn't hear it 2 weeks ago, we just want to make sure that you know, everybody understands what the proposal is, and then we'll follow that with the public hearing. So go ahead, next slide. So the overall budget is $164 million. That is all funds. That is a $15.4 million increase, or 10%, over 10%. And Ms. Moyers will actually explain that 10% in one of the upcoming slides. The general fund budget, which funds the operations of the city. So when you think of the city, you think of the general fund budget, like fire, police, parks, et cetera, schools. That's $79.6 million, of just over an 8% increase. Some of the significant themes in this budget are that this budget fully supports city schools. The local contribution is going up at over 9.5%. We have a new juvenile and domestic relations district court that will open later this year. That is fully funded as well, or that is at least funded to start an operating budget. This is brand new for us. This is basically a brand new department. So there'll be some slides about that as well. And then we have a new regional animal shelter opening also this summer. So that's very exciting, the new shelter in Verona. This budget provides stability in city services and supports employees, which you'll hear about as well. It also has significant increases in regional agencies that support mental health, human services, and youth and families. That bottom part's cut off. It increases support for tax relief programs as well. And then also, as you'll hear shortly, it increases the capacity for fiscal flexibility because we have many, many unknowns. And that takes me to the next slide, which starts to talk about some of those unknowns. This budget does propose a 91-cent per $100 assessed value rate on the real estate tax rate. The current rate is 89 cents. As has been apparent the last month, a lot has changed on the wharf, and this has everything to do with the situation in the tunnels. And I'm actually giving a report for those who would like to stay for that. I'll be giving a report at the end of this meeting as far as what has been happening with that. But the bottom line is that we have no idea how much those repairs will cost. We are just beginning the assessment, or we have a consultant working on that for us. And so we just don't know. And so this budget, when I presented this budget to council, it was to provide the most flexibility, frankly, in the face of unknowns. And it's difficult to adopt a budget not knowing what a gigantic expense this will probably end up being. We just don't know right now. So there's a lot of questions there. In the next few slides, I think will make that very apparent. And this is the second time we've seen these this evening. This is the area directly under Johnson Street where where it's blocked off, where you can't enter the police department way into the parking garage. And this is severe corrosion of the concrete and the rebar under that area. The next slide is underneath the Buyer Street section. And you can see here, that doesn't look good either. There's exposed rebar, and actually it's not even there anymore, and then concrete delamination. The next slide, again, this is underneath the middle portion of the wharf. So this is why we cannot drive cars into the wharf. And then this is probably the most compelling slide. This is also in the middle of the wharf, which is in the driveway to the wharf. And you can see where the water is and how the roof seems to be sloping. So these are serious infrastructure issues that have to be addressed. So I'm now going to turn it over to Ms. Moyers, who's going to walk through the rest of the presentation, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions before the public hearing.
So first glance, the 10.4 looks like a very large increase across all funds of the city. So I wanted to explain what makes that up. 5% of that 10.4% relates to capital projects in the water, sewer, and stormwater funds. Those can vary greatly from year to year because one project could be like $2 to $3 million. The contribution to the schools, their funding formula resulting in a 9.55% increase. And that's double counted when you look at the total budget because it appears in our general fund and then it appears in their education fund when it is transferred in. So any transfer between funds are counted twice in the overall total budget. And then a 2% increase in state and federal funding, but that has a restricted purpose. The majority of that is VDOT reimbursable funds. The other portion of that is the state and federal portion of the Department of Social Services and the Children's Services Act funds. And then that leaves 1.2% increase for all operating, other operating costs. So focusing on general fund revenues only, increase in real estate tax at the proposed rate would be 4.5 million. Personal property increase of 278,000. There are no material changes in sales and lodging tax revenues. We were able to increase the budget for meals tax revenue by 90,000. Business license, we increased the revenue there by 100,000. The next two categories are the state funding for the VDOT that I mentioned and the Department of Social Services and Children's Services Act. And then the recovered costs, this FY25 was our last year that we received a payment for the Rockingham Harrisonburg share of the jail buy-in. So that is no longer in our operating budget as income. So next slide. So the next couple slides are going to tell you exactly where every dollar of that increase is going on the expenditure side. We mentioned the school portion, $1,647,000. According to the school funding formula that was put in place a few years ago, resulting in a 9.55% increase. 657,000 is the equivalent of 2 cents on the real estate tax rate, dedicated to infrastructure repairs and improvements, with the focus being on the tunnels that run under the the Wharf and Johnson and Byers Street. 373,000 relate to separating from Augusta County, the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Courthouse. The majority of this is one full-time deputy in the Sheriff Department and one part-time. There remains two full-time positions there that he has requested that remain unfunded at this point. There is a funding for one full-time custodian and one part-time, with one full-time position remaining unfunded at this time, requested by building maintenance. And then operating increases of about 97,000, a majority of which is utility expense for that building and some operating supplies. All the other costs associated with that building will be covered by the state. That includes the judges and the clerk's office. Next slide, $1.1 million of the additional revenue will be going to fund a 3% cost of living increase for all full-time and part-time employees. 147,572 for other structural adjustments and 1.5% bonus for constitutional officers and their staff that was in the state budget. Some of this does follow the locality because not all those positions are funded by the state. A 10% increase in health insurance for both the city share and the employee share due to continued high claims in the health fund. And then we are unfreezing a traffic position for 60,000 that was frozen in FY23 to fund a $3 an hour raise that was given there. Other expenditures are about 306,000. 176,000 of that is we're increasing the tax relief budget for the elderly, disabled, and veterans. 16,500 for a replacement K-9 unit for the police department. The 40,000 we talked about earlier in the work session, that will more likely be adjusted down to 11,000. And then there's about 174,000 of other city department requests, and that's across the whole entire city. So we saw very large increases this year in our outside agencies and saw partnerships, with the largest being our share of additional Department of Social Services and Children's Services Act expenditures of almost 281,000 with our share. Animal shelter costs are going up 68%, which is $119,000. A majority of that is due to our usage of that shelter going up due to a couple seizures of animals that happened in 2024. In addition, we're moving into a bigger space. So that increases their operating budget, and we still have the old shelter that we have some operating expenditures for until we sell that location. Valley Community Services Board increasing by 137,000. That is fully funding Staunton's 10% required match for Valley Community Services Board. We did not fully fund it last year. This returns us to fully funding our required 10% match. Middle River Regional Jail, increase of almost 44,000, which is a 1.3%. Our usage there did go down, which helped keep that at a 1.3% increase, which is good for us. 29,000 increase for Office on Youth. Health Department, almost 9,000. SDGA, that is a pass-through for the downtown tax, an increase of 9,000. An additional 35,000 for the Children's Advocacy Center that is fully funding their $50,000 request. Increase for the Talking Book Center of 1,700. There were also some decreases in the outside agencies, and some that's because that was their request. The Juvenile Detention Center is using some of their fund balance, which lowers our share required for them. On the right is the VDOT reimbursable funds that is directly tied to that state revenue that you saw went up this year. So next slide, the 2 cents that we're proposing is $657,030 to be put into a new reserve for infrastructure improvements in the city, with the focus being on the tunnels. So we put additional slides in here. These were shown last week during a work session. And technically the pool house is not part of the FY26 budget, but we want to talk about it because a general question we get is, can we just use this money for the wharf and not do this project? So I think it's important that we remind you why we're doing it, and why the focus is on replacement. Currently, it's already under design, using our ARPA money for design. 67% of this construction is funded with interest that we've been able to earn on our ARPA funds and our CIP reserves. And the reason we're doing this is because our preliminary architecture report that was done by TNL indicated that there was some very concerning structural issues with the pool house. There was issues with the exterior wall, steel joists have corrosion. There's accessibility issues, failing retaining wall where the ramp that goes down to the pool. And overall, it has some functional issues with the showers being on the upper level and the pool being on the lower level. The next slide just shows you some of the pictures from the TNL preliminary report, showing some of the concerns they had, steps pulling away from the building, rusting joints, the accessibility issue in the shower and the bathroom. Next, you'll see some of the immediate issues, that the concrete that was falling there on the walkway have been repaired. There was some immediate repairs made to the exterior steps so that it could open last year to make sure it was safe, and we continue to evaluate that annually. So I just wanted to go over that. And then the next slide was on the Edgewood sidewalk project. That project has been approved, with mostly funded with grant funds. The city share is 400 to $1 million, depending on which estimate is true when we get to the bid process. And that is going to be funded with our CIP reserves, the reserves that we have set aside for sidewalks and the bike and pedestrian. Proprietary funds, there are no proposed utility increases this year. We will need to reevaluate our fee structure in 2027's budget cycle, because there are some significant capital needs in our future and the next 5 years. And that's true in sewer, water, and most importantly, the environmental fund. So the landfill capitals budget for the next 5 years, our share of that will be $5 million, with the main projects being relocating the scale house and the admin office to the back of the landfill, because now they're having issues where the traffic backs up onto Cooks Creek, and that is a violation. There's a plan to replace some of their large equipment pieces, and opening cell 6 is scheduled for FY29, I believe. And so we're hoping that we can control the amount of garbage going to the landfill through our refuse modernization, because our operating cost and our capital cost for the landfill is all based on the tonnage from Staunton that goes into the landfill. So the last few slides, you saw these in the introduction of the budget, just some accomplishments that we have had here in the city. Sometimes we tend to focus on all the bad news and infrastructure issues, so we wanted to end on some positive news. We got a $9 million grant for the Staunton Crossing to put in the water and infrastructure in the water tank. Crossing Way, the new road opened up, that was a VDOT funded project in the crossing. There were multiple new businesses that opened up around the city in the last year. New housing, the Arcadia Building Apartments opened on Beverly Street. So that is all excellent news. We do have some infrastructure projects that we would like to acknowledge and that we are thankful that are currently happening. The Gardner Springs is one of those that are most important, that we did get some funding from the DEQ ARPA funds to help with that. The Gypsy Hill Park Stream Restoration, we did get a SLAF grant for that and use ARPA funds for that. Cole Avenue, we did get SLAF grant to help with that. And JNDR District Courthouse, which should be open later this fall. Of course, the grants that we got for the Staunton Crossing, water and sewer. And the pool house is currently under design. The The regional radio project is underway. That is an effort between Augusta County, Waynesboro, and Staunton. That is very important to our area. We use ARPA funds to do some building security updates in city buildings. And then West Beverly Street improvements have begun again this spring. The Uniontown Neighborhood Action Plan and the Bill Grant have been submitted for that. We should hear back in midsummer about that. West End Plan, we're currently updating our comp plan. And we're in our 6th year of HUD entitlement funds. So that is all that I have to present. I can take questions or we can move into the public hearing. I know it's about your 4th time. seeing
This is
it.
like
I'm
the
sorry.
4th time today we've heard this. So, right.
Yes.
I think we could allow the time to go to the public, I
Okay.
suppose. All righty. In a moment, I will open the public hearing. This is a time that council sets aside to hear from citizens and others about the specific topic on the agenda. We ask that you please give your name, your address, and then keep your remarks at 5 minutes or less. When you reach the 5-minute time limit, I will let you know that your time has expired. For our Zoom participants, please raise your hand now if you wish to speak on this particular public hearing. If you raise your hand during this public hearing, you will also be able to raise your hand during matters from the public. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. Once everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity, I will then close the public hearing. I will now open the public hearing, so if you wish to speak, please approach the podium, and we will alternate between individuals physically present and those that have their hands raised via Zoom. Again, this public hearing is for the item B only concerning the budget. And you are asked not to speak on any topic that does not directly relate to this topic. I will now open the public hearing. Would anyone like to come approach the podium to speak?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Elizabeth Respis, and I currently serve as the president of the Arcadia Project Board. My husband and I live at 200 North Market Street. I'm here today to ask the City Council to include $30,000 in the 2026 budget for the Arcadia Project. Your support for the project is critical. Lenders and potential donors want to see that Staunton supports what we are doing. We're working hard to raise the funds needed to start construction. Your approval of our $30,000 request will serve as a strong indication to others that you recognize the value of reopening the historic city landmark. In 1913, a group of people came together to build a beautiful building on Beverly Street. They didn't create a run-of-the-mill building. Thanks to T.J. Collins, they built an impressive building that elevated the architecture along the street. It was a community gathering spot. It became part of the fabric of downtown Staunton. Our group, which is fully volunteer, is on the cusp of giving back to Staunton what it has lost. Your help is critical to our success. But time is of the essence, and we cannot afford to let this building sit empty. The state of Virginia awarded us $1.6 million in ARPA funds for building renovations. This money must be used by the end of 2026, or it will disappear. What we are asking of Staunton is a small price to pay to help us keep the $1.6 million grant and to reopen a key historic property in the heart of downtown Staunton. Let me give you just a few examples of what we're creating. Imagine being able to come downtown to hear good live music, whether it's acoustic, jazz, bluegrass, or old-time classical, or some other genre. You can take a dance lesson or bring friends to join you on the dance floor. You can see an old movie or a film festival on a big screen, as they should be seen. You can bring your families for a magic show, a puppet show, or a family-friendly movie. You can meet friends at our cafe. You can take a class on film editing or digital storytelling. Companies can hold meetings in our space. The space can be rented for such things as weddings, family reunions, or anniversary parties. Bus companies can park alongside our building and in the designated bus spot, and we can provide boxed lunches for the tourists while entertaining them with a show. We've come a long way, and we're 73% towards the fundraising goal for completing the renovation and build out. With your help, others will see that they should invest in what we're doing. We're investing in our community. We are investing in what we are doing. We are investing in opening a building where community can be celebrated. One definition of community is sharing, participation, and fellowship. We will be able to offer all of those things in our building. Reopening the theater has a clear economic benefit to the city. Staunton is an attractive tourist destination, and this building will be another gem in that crown. We're so lucky to have this beautiful building downtown. It's up to us to carry on the legacy of bringing people together to enjoy their free time in Staunton. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Kesker, do we have anyone online?
We have no hands raised on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Kesker. Good evening.
Mr. Kessiker, could I take the opportunity to hand out what was going to be something that was transmitted digitally but wasn't possible? Pamela Mason Wagner, 164 North Coulter Street. We have choices about what kind of city we want to live in. The movie It's a Wonderful Life illustrated what could have happened if in Bellows Falls, if Mr. Potter had taken, Bedford Falls, if Mr. Potter had taken control of most of the real estate. Fortunately for Staunton, George Bailey's worldview has prevailed. We made choices not to tear down our Main Street Historic District. We chose to invest in burying downtown power lines to enhance our Main Street. We helped build a Shakespearean theater along with a parking structure because we want to attract tourists and visitors who bring revenue. What Arcadia Project proposes will build on and extend that legacy of historic preservation and all its downstream benefits. Dead buildings do not generate economic activity. Yet a large, unique, historic building woven into the fabric of downtown, but with limited future uses, typically requires some public-private cooperation for successful redevelopment. Economic development falls under the rightful purview of city government, and the arts are a proven driver of economic activity. Witness the restaurants and shops that followed on the heels of the Blackfriars Theater. According to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, in 2022, the arts and culture sector in the state of Virginia was larger than the agriculture business. Quality of life is another area where our city rightfully puts its resources. We all enjoy our beautiful parks and the athletic and cultural activities that take place within them, like at the Gypsy Hill Bandstand during the summer months. We are poised to continue some of these cultural activities indoors during the non-summer months. Education is another responsibility a city has to its citizens. Arcadia is prepared to fill in gaps in public school offerings around media arts classes. A growing filmmaking ecosystem in the Valley needs workers to be trained and industry ready. These are good paying jobs for our young people. In closing, the city has always made good choices where these matters are concerned. We hope they will continue to do so, and we urge you to find a way to fund the Arcadia project's outside funding request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kesker, do we have anyone online?
We do, but we have no hands raised at the
Okay,
moment.
thank you, Mr. Kesker. Sir, yes, please approach the podium.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Stanley Grimm. I am the treasurer of the Acadia Project, and my wife and I are its lead donors. My wife and I, Lynn and I, moved to Staunton in about 2018 to be closer to a daughter. We really like it here. Staunton has continually surprised us by the quality of life here, by the quality of the city services, and by the opportunities to enjoy the arts and theater. My work life was in Washington, D.C., and we raised our children in Northern Virginia. After I retired, we moved to a town of 1,200 people in a rural county in the mountains of Western Maryland. My wife and I both served on arts organizations whose goals were to bring the arts to a community where 90% of the elementary students were on free and reduced price meals. It was difficult, and we learned a lot. Among our biggest problems was the lack of an adequate performing arts space. My wife and I got involved in the Acadia Project because of Klein's ice cream. True story. During COVID, I was talking to Pam's husband, Tom, about the fact we no longer felt comfortable to go to Klein's ice cream. And we really liked Klein's ice cream. Tom was bemoaning the fact that he had to put trash cans inside the theater building to catch the rainwater that was leaking through the roof. I hope someone else would donate enough money to fix the roof and make Tom's life easier. A day or so later, Tom shows up at my door with 2 quarts of Klein's ice cream, raspberry and lemon ginger snap. At that moment, my wife and I decided that philanthropy is not a spectator sport and that we should help fix the roof and do more. Those are the 2 most expensive quarts of Klein's ice cream in history. I could have brought some here tonight. It might have worked. It's hard to know. It seems perfectly obvious to me and probably to you that our community would benefit from a performing arts and community cultural center at our location. I don't think the benefits of our project are at issue, nor is the competence of our board at issue. We've worked hard to get to where we are. We got rid of the debt that was on the building when we acquired it. We fixed the roof, we remediated asbestos, we have construction-ready architectural drawings, and we have a contractor who will do the work. And we have a board that can see it through. As a donor, I have always had confidence in our board. We have a diverse board with lots of expertise. We have expertise in architecture, contract management, accounting, music, and documentary film. And we've done surveys to get a sense for what our community wants with our project. All we need is money. Money is tight, both for the city and our donors. We know that, and it may get worse. But now is our best chance. If we lose the 1.6 million from the state because we don't raise matching funds, it could be another decade or more before we have another chance, and that would be a shame. So I know times are tough, but I urge you to grant our one-time, this is not a recurring request, our one-time request of $30,000. We believe that the grant from the city will give our project credibility to raise the remainder of the money from larger donors. Out of respect for your time, we're going to try to limit the number of people who take the mic in support of the Acadia project. We don't want you to be here all night. I think I've taken enough of your time, and we thank you for your time. There are people in the audience who have come to support the $30,000 funding request, and I'd like them to stand at this time. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. Jessica, do we have anyone's hands raised?
No, ma'am, we have no hands raised.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Dr. Mary Miller, 471 Albemarle Avenue. When I retired from my solo medical practice in Connecticut, I moved with my horse to Aiken, South Carolina. I became involved in much of the city, being on the board of the community theater was one of the most rewarding parts of
those years. There were many ways the community theater brought the city together. One of the waiters from O'Charlie's was a talented singer in many of the musicals. Many businesses sponsored the sold-out concerts. And once a month, citizens gathered for the informal coffee house for music and poetry readings. We have the opportunity to finish the Arcadia project on East Beverly Street, where young and old, residents and tourists can gather, connect, teach and learn to enrich one another. It can be a center in which to share and collaborate. Support by the City Council will encourage more of our community to participate in the endeavor. A $1.6 million grant, I think you've heard that before, from the state must be matched. $30,000 from the city will demonstrate the financial and cultural benefit to Staunton for long into the future. Please add your support for the Arcadia project and give Staunton one more center for which citizens may be proud. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Mr. Kessinger, do we have any hands raised?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm going to switch gears here.
All right.
My name is Randolph Burton, 211 Hendron Avenue. Thank you, Mayor and members of council for your time and attention. I'm addressing you this evening on behalf of the Talking Book Center, or TBC, as a member of their board. Although most everyone is familiar with the public library, the TBC provides similar services, but specifically for those in our community who are blind or visually impaired or disabled in such a way that they can't benefit from typical library materials and services. We serve several cities and counties in the Upper Shenandoah Valley, and we are based here in Staunton. A little under 40% of our funding comes from donations and other fundraising efforts, while about 60% is provided by the various governing bodies of the localities where we provide service, which includes Staunton, Augusta, Waynesboro, and also Highland, Bath, and Rockbridge counties, and Lexington and Buena Vista. In the city manager's FY 2026 proposed budget, it was indicated city funding for the TBC would be increased by $1,700 to a total of $4,000. While this is perhaps one of the smallest items in the city budget, it is vitally important for us. And I'm requesting that as you are making the difficult decisions about specific programs and priorities, that you please do keep this level of funding through to final approval of the budget. While the city of Staunton has for many years provided space and other support at the public library building for our staff at no cost, without which we could not continue to operate and for which we have been and remain very grateful, the direct financial contribution in the proposed Staunton City budget is crucial for us to be able to continue providing these important services to the blind and visually impaired members of our community. How much do these services matter to our patrons who need and use them? The Talking Book Center occasionally sends out a survey to its users asking how the center is doing and how it can be improved. And I would like to provide just a little feedback from their responses. First of all, 77% of the TBC patrons report using their materials daily. Second, 98% of the respondents reported the highest level of satisfaction with the quality of service. There was only one who didn't, and it was just one below the highest level. And finally, one of the survey questions asks what the patrons would like our locality funders to know about the value of the Talking Book Center in their lives. And I want to share a handful of those comments with you. The Talking Book Center is a godsend for the visually impaired. I have been an avid reader my entire life, and books are like old friends I have lost. The Talking Book program has reunited me with those old friends and is very important to keep mind active and my spirits up. Being legally blind, the books on tape provide daily activity as I live alone. It means the world to avid readers who can no longer see well. It helps fight depression and is in fact inspiring. Thank you Macular degeneration is so limiting, and talking books opens up the world to us. The service is a lifesaver. For those of us who love to read and can't handle regular print, the TBC really picks up and solves many difficulties courteously and promptly. Thank you so much. The TBC is the only way that I can enjoy reading. Using the tapes daily, I look forward to my reading time every day. My last comment I'll share, my dad is in a nursing home and visually impaired, and his service has allowed him to do something he loves in a way that he can still be somewhat independent. It is really a priceless service for my dad and for his family. Thank you. There are many more comments of a similar nature. Those who need and use our service are often invisible to our wider community. But where else can such a modest contribution make such a significant improvement in their quality of life? On behalf of the Talking Book Center and all our patrons, I want to thank you for your past and continued support, which means so much to us. And for any of you, those of you out there who know people who might need their service, please do come see us. We would be happy to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Mr. Kessinger, do we have any hands raised?
No, ma'am. We have no hands raised.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Wagner, 164 North Coulter Street. I am a former president of the Arcadia Project Board. I kind of wanted to sum up a little, and I won't take very much of your time. First of all, we understand that you have a lot of decisions to make that are financial. We don't take any of this lightly. We know that there's a squeeze and that there are many hands out. So we didn't want you to think that we're just frivolous about this and about our request. We've come a long way. I hope that came out in what people were saying, but we are over 70% of what we need to open our doors and start serving the public and this community. We have done that mostly on our own without support from the city. And now we're at a point where many of our donors are sitting back and they're saying, is the city going to support this? Because if they do, we will. So that's an important point for us not to be missed. You will unlock the rest of what we need to get our project done with this grant. I want to go back a few years, just a few years ago, and to what that building looked like. It was desolate. It was a dark, desolate building on a prime corner of this business district, a half a block from Shakespeare. Paint was flaking. The marquee was dark. Glass was broken. Couldn't put letters up there. We fixed all that and it looks really great. It looks so great that some people go, when are you going to open? Like tomorrow? Because the outside looks so good. Inside, we still have a lot of work to do. So we don't want it to go back to looking like that, but inevitably, if the project is abandoned, it will. Buildings that aren't taken care of deteriorate. That's what happens. I guess finally, I want to say something personal. Pam and I moved to Staunton 8 years ago. We looked in a lot of places when we wanted to decamp from New York City. And Staunton had a lot of things that we were looking for, a community that was committed to the arts, which is the world we came from. And we felt we could join that community and participate in it and contribute to it. What we also thought, and we researched this in a lot of places, is that this city government was committed to the future, was looking to the future, had made steps and made decisions that were about the future. And I think that's what we're asking you to do now, is to look a little bit ahead to the future, what this will bring in the way of economic activity, what it will bring to bring a community together, and what it will bring to make that downtown, that corner that used to be desolate, vibrant again and full of activity and people doing things Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Mr. Keseker, do we have a hand raised?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. This is my first time speaking at a city council meeting. My name is Nikki West, 950 Selma Boulevard. My, I guess, comment is going in another direction than the folks prior to me have discussed. Like them, like a few of the people that spoke before me, I moved to Staunton from another city. My husband and I moved here. We started a business here in downtown Staunton. I ended up moving my mother and my sister here, and I'm sure my brother is on his way. So we've moved our entire family. We absolutely love what the city has to offer. It's gorgeous. The community here is welcoming, and we've really been happy building a home here. One of the other draws, I should say, for us and probably other people is that the cost of living has been nice and reasonable compared to other cities of comparable size nearby. And, you know, I do not envy your position with the decisions that you're making, and I totally commend the work put into the budget by Leslie and the other city employees doing this. I do, however, worry that the budget reliance on an increase in the realty tax rate could push some of the people who have called Staunton home for much longer than I have. It could push them out. And they were here building the community that I found and loved. Obviously, I don't have any ideas or any solutions. If I did, I would be running for city council. But I think that the increase in the rate on top of, you know, the recent assessment, which I know has nothing to do with this conversation, could be difficult and could end up having some unintended consequences for the community here, which I would hate to see. About a year ago, Augusta County assessments also almost tripled. That's where my apple orchard is, where I make most of the cider that I then bring into Staunton, to our tasting room. And with the, you know, almost tripling of the assessment, the Augusta County city, or the county commission, at least considered a kind of a rate that was lower, an equalization rate. I don't at all compare Staunton to Augusta County. The services here and the community here are wonderful, which is why I moved here and not outside of the city. But I do wonder if, you know, potentially revisiting the budget, at least at the original rate, if some programs, like thinking about, you know, the programs that you're trying to offer and thinking about who they're trying to help, and just making sure that you're doing the most good for the most people. I love art and I love culture, and I don't want to see any of, you know, I would hate for those to be on the chopping block for anything. But I also want to, you know, preserve what we have here now. That's all I got, but you all are doing a great job. I love, you know, I voted for every single one of you, I think. I'm not just saying that, but like, you know, I would love to, you know, keep it that way as long as possible and keep the community that we have. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Mr. Keseker, do we have any hands raised?
No, ma'am, we have no hands raised.
Do we have anyone else who would like to speak? We have a room full of people.
I'd like to say that I'd be very happy to deliver a couple of quarts of to your door.
I would have to check with our city attorney to see if that would be at all illegal.
If you bring it to a council meeting, that's a whole other story. So you have
If
to
you bring
bring
it to a
here.
council meeting. All righty, well, if that's all of you who would like to speak, the public hearing is now closed. Any other discussion from council, questions, presentations? And by the way, I did get all of your emails. I read them. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I did not have the chance to respond. Any more discussion, questions on the budget for staff now? Before we move on to the next item?
Yeah.
Do you guys want to have any follow-up for staff on the budget, or do you want?
I'd like to mention that there's a budget work session that will advertise a special meeting
Right.
next
Okay.
Thursday at 7 PM in this room.
All righty then. Moving on to item C, an update on Gypsy Hill Park and Cole Avenue stream restorations. Ms. Beauregard.
Willow Hughes is here this
Okay.
evening, and she is here in her first capacity as the Environmental Programs Administrator. I hope I got that title right. She was promoted when Pete Kessaker retired, so we're very excited to have her. And I'm going to let her provide a update to the two great projects we have going on at Gypsy Hill Park and Cole Avenue, the stream restoration projects.
Evening.
Good evening.
I'll start with Gypsy Hill Park. The stream channel work there is actually complete. There are just 3 additional tasks remaining. Those are installing the sidewalks, finishing up the plantings, and installing the required educational signage. There have been a few delays just this last month with some primarily issues running into underground utility lines. The contractors did damage a Dominion line. They have repaired it, but that caused delay in their schedule. In response to that, they are hiring a third-party group to do sonar mapping of the utilities in the area around the sidewalks to ensure that they don't hit any more utility lines, and to ensure that when they place the sidewalk, it's not put over any utility lines, which will hopefully prevent us from having to tear up the sidewalk should there be issues with the utility lines in that area in the future. Getting those groups scheduled has also caused a little bit of delay, but we are supportive of them doing that as it will hopefully help reduce issues in the future. The plantings, all of them are things that need to be planted in a little bit of warmer weather. We had another freeze this week. It's been colder. They are aiming for late April to get those done. It's possible they'll be pushed into May, but they are trying to work as quickly as they can to give us the park back. And the educational signage, I am waiting on a design from the engineer. Once that gets to me, I'll get with Public Works to make sure that they are good with it and to discuss where we would like to place them. So again, the contractors are working to get everything done as soon as possible, but they're also being very thorough in making sure that everything is done correctly. And for Cole Avenue, a little bit of a briefer update. The project is still on schedule. The vast majority of the work for that one is done. That one included some sanitary sewer relocations. That work is almost complete. The majority of the plantings are complete. There are just a few remaining items that will be completed over the next few weeks, and substantial completion should be reached by the end of the month. Both of these projects were at least halfway funded by DEQ SLAF grants. As such, DEQ has been on site to review both projects. Minor comments on Gypsy Hill Park, which have all been addressed. I walked through with the engineer last week and he confirmed they had all been addressed, and there were no major comments on Cole Avenue. They both said that both projects look really great. They were very pleased and had no major comments for us to work on at this time. So I think that covers everything. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you guys may have.
Excellent.
Is the stream remediation project for behind the high school, is that on the calendar for future years? That requires more funding, I assume. And what do you see as the next steps for that?
It's in the CIP. There's one before that actually on Asylum Creek in front of the villages. That's in the fiscal year 26 CIP. Once they're approved in our budget, we would start working on getting a formalized plan and going from there.
The SLAF funding that's a
Mhm.
50-50
Yes.
match.
Yes.
Does it look like that's going to be, that's a state grant, right? And
Yes.
that's, looks like it's going to be available for the foreseeable future.
Yes. I did ask the SLAF team when they were here if they had any indications that there would be any issues with that going forward, and currently they did not think there would be.
And then the Asylum Creek one, that's, with this, is the city going to be working with private owner?
Yes. There's not a lot of details ironed out for that one yet.
Okay.
That would be the first step.
Sounds like the Gypsy Hill Stream project will be done in time for the Save the Bay event in Gypsy Hill Park. So that'll be a nice,
Yes.
maybe sort of a groundbreaking celebration, not groundbreaking, but completion ceremony for that,
The
for
ground
that
has been
project.
broken.
We hope
And a
to do
spur to get
something-
lots of people involved in that event.
Yes, and we hope to do something formal when everything's completed at Gypsy Hill, since it is such a public project.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Hughes? Thank you so much for your work on this.
Thank you,
And
guys.
congratulations on your new
Yeah.
job. All righty. So we're moving on to our final item, an update on flood mitigation efforts, the tunnel survey and structural evaluation work resulting in a partial closure of the Wharf parking lot and closure of Byers Street. Ms. Beauregard.
Okay, thank you.
ma'am.
Mr. Lylehart, our city engineer, and I will also tag team this one. So some of these slides will look familiar from the last update we did, which was a month ago. Go to the next slide. So these are just to remind everybody, in case you forgot. I'll never forget. This was 5 years ago, at the first of the flood. Remember, we had twin floods back then. Next slide. This is the one that was 2 weeks later. So unlucky twin floods of 2020, and this is right in the middle of COVID. So in responding to those floods, we looked to a consultant for a flood mitigation study, which was completed in early 2021. Staff came back to council. There were many recommendations. Many of them were not feasible though. So we went back and came back. We were told to go back out, come back to us with some reasonable recommendations. We did that in August 2021. And one of those initiatives was tunnel maintenance and improvements. And then in September of that next year, council allocated ARPA funds for the tunnels study. Okay, fast forward a couple of years, Wiley Wilson starts their tunnel survey in December. They started the structural evaluation, which is where all this is kind of starting really, just last month, so March 3rd. A few days later, or like immediately after that, they said they had some concerns about certain areas. Streets and parking lots were closed to traffic, and here's where we are today. And why was this taken? And simply stated, it was public safety. That is our #1 priority, keeping the public safe. And Wiley Wilson was concerned enough, and they are the experts, that we felt like this action was necessary, and that was the right decision to make. With this, I'm going to let Lyle take over here for a little bit.
So the the engineers at Wiley Wilson, as you guys have seen, they've specified some of the areas of immediate concern with greater detail. And you can see here the kind of the orange hatching there, the areas right in the middle of the wharf near the confluence, but then also the areas along Johnson Street and Byers Street.
You can't see because it's blocked by the.
But anyway, so those are the areas we say the wharf tunnels, that's what we're referring to. Of course, where Gum Spring Branch and Lewis Creek are effectively piped underground. There's a few more familiar pictures from earlier, and that's some photos there underneath Johnson Street. And there's some severe concrete spall. And what is spall? Spall is basically concrete that's eroding, where it's, instead of a nice smooth surface, like it's sort of on the left side with the orange marks, starts to come apart, and you get, that's just called spalling. It's not good. And then there's also spalling, and then also the degradation of the rebar. And here's a picture you can see where there used to be rebar, and the delamination, effectively a layer, usually a lower layer, starts to separate. And there in the next slide, you can see that was under Buyer Street. The next one, this is under the kind of for the middle of the wharf. That's not, it doesn't initially appear to be as big of a area that is delaminated, but then this is a much larger area. And so the kind of keep that image in mind, because that affects how we continue the evaluation and ultimately proceed with the repair process. So what we're doing with Wiley is concentrating on the immediate high impact repairs, concentrating now on these areas. And that consists of the tunnel beneath West Johnson Street, where it comes out from underneath the parking garage, and then also underneath Buyer Street. And the main reason is because we're able to kind of cordon off the effective areas of the wharf, and thanks to some very rapid and creative actions by Public Works staff, able to open up the entire west side of the lot and good section of the east part of the lot. But Johnson Street, Buyer Street, more impactful to business as the way that's currently limited. And so just want to keep in mind that conditions are challenging and complex, and even in the preliminary design efforts, there's environmental permitting that is involved, working around and likely in a live stream. And that's already been initiated as far as determining the permitting process. Also, dealing with existing utilities can be challenging, particularly in Johnson Street, because in addition, in Johnson Street, there are 2 sewer lines that run, sanitary sewer lines, or they're encased in concrete, but they're on either lower corner of the tunnel, kind of running with the tunnel. But there's also a water line and other utilities that go through the top part of the tunnel through there. And so it's not just a cut and replace type of procedure there. And so in as well as doing this, we want to make sure we're adequately planning for traffic. That's a busy area, not just for vehicular traffic, but of course, as we know, with farmers market and other things going on there, that's something we want to very much take into consideration. So Wiley Wilson continues to develop the design of their preliminary repair plan. The goals are, as Leslie mentions, public safety is first, but also to minimize the disruption to the wharf area, and also be cost effective. And that's a little bit of a tension, a tension in the sense of we want to get things back working as soon as possible, but at the same time, we want to keep in mind what's going on long term, so that we don't spend a fair amount of money on a fix that later we think, oh, we would have done it differently if had only known more of what's happening. And then ultimately to get downtown streets fully functional. And again, this is the kind of the immediate area of concern. Leslie mentioned earlier, the study and the tunnel full evaluation project is still going to happen. But right now we're just looking at these immediate areas. So what they've recommended as a repair process is a top-down approach, meaning basically you have to excavate and come through the road surface due to safety and limited access. The image that I asked you to keep in your mind earlier, we would have preferred to fix from below if possible. That's the least invasive method, and we had some meetings on site, even brought in some industry experts, some contractors that do this sort of thing all the time, and they really didn't want to have anything to do with it. And that was just to further evaluate to see what condition it was in. And so it just made sense to move forward with an approach from the top down, and that'll involve removal and replacement of the tunnel walls, as well as the roof or ceiling of it. And of course, the ceiling actually helps keep the walls from caving in because of the lateral pressure there. So, and cost estimates and the repair timeline are still in development. And so we don't know them at this time. The next slide, you'll see it's another flashback to almost 5 years ago, the Johnson Street garage. And this is shortly after the 2020 flood. And it was the first of the twin floods that did this damage. It was very visible. Obviously, it was an event, and it lifted up an 8-inch slab within the garage. You can see where it pushed away at the rebar. And it also kind of blew out a little section of out in front of the entrance there, the eastern entrance to the garage along Johnson Street. And the reason I'm showing this here, just kind of to recap briefly, what can be challenged about working in the tunnel. While this was very visible because it was the result of a flood event and what happened, it was convenient in one sense that it was able to kind of cordon it off within the garage. Obviously, that lower deck was out of commission for a while, but it proceeded with the design and went on to bid and went to construction. But even during construction, you just keep finding things that you don't anticipate. And this was the case where we actually had pretty good visibility of what we were dealing with and just trying to repair and replace. And examples were out at the entrance, there was a duct bank by Verizon that had to be basically reconstructed and work with them to deal with that. That extended the project significantly while the initial scope was fairly close to completion. That had to be done and rebuilt there at the entrance. Even electrical conduit that was found underneath the slab ended up having to be replaced. Initially, after going through as-built drawings, it was still unclear what it was. Turns out, thankfully, we didn't find the hard way what it went to, but it did go to the elevator there in the parking garage, as well as dealing with some of the sewer laterals and piping below. So all in all, it was an experience that reminds us we want to get as much information as we can before we start digging. And part of that also involves next steps include some geotechnical work that Wiley is going to have done that will involve having a drill rig out there to get some soil borings on either side of where the work's going to need to take place. So we can know as much as possible beforehand, minimize disruption and maximize our efficiency. Since the last time we talked to you guys about it, Wiley has been back and has continued their initial structural evaluation. And thankfully we are happy to report that there's in the Central Avenue area up to Pump Street, there's no areas of immediate concern identified that would involve the response we had here, where we got to restrict traffic or something. There will be continued assessment. It's not a pristine brand new tunnel, obviously, so there will be continued maintenance as mentioned there. And so we'll have them kind of focus on that more later. They did also get the lower section of Lewis Creek from Augusta to New Street. However, we did get a response from them even as late as just today, found out that there is a new area of concern on New Street to the point of they wanted to let us know and even restrict, thankfully not traffic, the street is still open, but we're going to have to block off a few parking spaces right there at the edge of where it daylights there on the downstream end. And there's even this evening we're blocking off. There's four parking spaces there, and so that'll be another section that we'll need to look at in the shorter term rather than the long term as far as repairs.
I wish this was the gift that stopped giving, honestly. Okay, so one thing, this conference, yes, ma'am.
Could you go to the back to the previous slide? Was it the little orange
Yes.
blobby piece? That's
It's the orange blobby piece.
Okay.
It's right where I'm calling it a bridge. It's not really a bridge, but you know where the creek was right there.
right.
It's those spaces right there. Yeah. But traffic is still flowing. You can still park on the right-hand side. It's just those 4 spaces. So we'll put something out about that. I believe PD has already gone out there in public works with some cones to try to get folks, if there's anybody that was in those spaces, to try to get those spaces cleared. So, yep. So not as extensive, but again, it's, yeah. Thank you. Wish that would stop. Okay, so I just want to be clear that what we are not talking about is everything we've just told you is completely independent of any possible daylighting, which you all have not discussed. There is a FY26 capital project of $30,000 to study the feasibility of daylighting. If council wanted to pursue this approach, that really would be a long-term decision, and that would need to take time to be studied and assessed. Costs would be significant, and we should probably start planning as soon as possible, or at least exploring what that might look like. Community engagement would be extensive, obviously, and the wharf would have limited capacity parking for years probably, because you wouldn't want to necessarily put money into fixing the middle part of the wharf. So that would be that would not be usable. So lots of things to consider. City staff is working on a flood mitigation plan, and this is a requirement for certain grants. So that's a good thing. So that there's things happening, but all these things need to be discussed. So everything we've just said has nothing to do with daylighting. That is long term. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there as you think and consider once we kind of get past this, what's kind of next for that. I'll just briefly talk about parking. So of course, Byers Street remains closed over the tunnel. You can't pass through there, obviously. We were able to open an east side of the wharf, which has been great. And so we have a lot of parking in the wharf, not all of it, obviously. Of course, we've talked about the main entrance of the wharf remaining closed. The eastern entrance, which we just talked about, there is free parking in the wharf, and Johnson and New have are paid parking. We do need to cover our cost, obviously, still. So we felt it was important to return those two garages to paid parking, especially since New Street, we have a relationship with the hotel at the New Street lot. And if you go to the next slide, we are looking at longer term parking and what that considerations might be. This is really an opportunity. One of those opportunities being when the Augusta County courts move to Verona, there'll be fewer cars downtown and more available spaces. And then this is a chance for us to review parking behavior and needs based on the current parking configuration. I just took a picture here of a study that was done in 2017. So we may try to dust that off and see what's in there, but it's almost 10 years old. But we will be putting kind of a parking team together after the budget to start thinking through some of these issues. The next slide. So again, another huge thanks to Public Works and everybody on this slide for their quick thinking and creative ways of doing things, especially Public Works, who opened up that other entrance to the wharf parking lot. On the next slide, I want to remind everybody about the local business retention survey. We extended the deadline to April 18th, so that's in a week. So we look forward to hearing from businesses, especially if you're on or near the wharf. And then speaking of businesses on or near the wharf, our economic development department has put together a meeting that will happen later this month for the Wharf District Business and Community Network. We know there's residents on the wharf, so we want to make sure that we are also including the residents. And this really is a way for the city to recognize and acknowledge that the ongoing changes are going to present a challenge to the wharf and to downtown. And so this is a way to kind of come at those challenges in a unified way. And so we look forward to meeting with the businesses and the community who live and do business on the wharf. And I think this will be a really good first step because obviously when we begin construction, we're going to have extensive communication with them because it will be disruptive. So a lot needs to happen before that starts, and this will be a good way for that to be formulated, and we can, be very proactive in that way. I think that's my last slide. It is my last slide. So we'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have at this time.
Ms. Beauregard, how are we coming on having an accurate count on usage of the parking garage?
We're still working on how to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's still on our to-do list.
It'd be good info to have.
Yes, agreed. We're working on figuring out a way to get that data.
if we haven't already done so, can we reach out to the county to see number of employees in their facility and average daily number of visitors, just so we can start making some estimates?
Yeah, we probably, yeah, most of those are probably going to be people coming to the courts. We can see about getting those numbers. Yep. I think we actually probably have those numbers. We'll have to see about that. Any
A
other
great thing to
questions?
consider this holistically, to look at the parking. It is a great opportunity to revisit that, and congratulations to you and Amanda on convening the surrounding businesses.
It was Amanda
having
and
that.
Jessica.
Thank you.
It's a great idea.
Thank you, Amanda and
Great.
Jessica. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it is a great idea, and I commend them for, kudos to them for spearheading this. So I look forward to meeting everybody in a few weeks.
With the two known, not counting New Street, with the two known areas of concern on the public roadway, any guess for time frame of when we might be able to get out an RFP for design services? I mean, are we talking weeks, months still?
Well, the design, we're using our on-call contract as far as,
Okay.
so we wouldn't need to do an RFP for.
Why, can Wiley Wilson do all that in-house, or are we a different consultant?
They're heading it up. They may have some sub-consultants for like some of the geotechnical work or different things, and certainly in the, permitting and that sort of thing. But
Okay.
I guess you asked the question on one of these slides. I'm definitely in favor of the two-tier approach to daylight the things that can be daylighted, to pursue, so that we don't waste money. Everything that I've read, studies that daylighting things that can be daylighting is much more cost effective than trying to maintain tunnels long-term. Plus you have the obvious recreational benefits, better flood mitigation. It's just win-win-win. For the areas where where you don't want to disturb viable buildings or roadways, then I assume we'd have to do repairs. And so it's a question of which are the repair areas and which are the daylighting areas. That's the approach that I'd like to see.
That is the approach we're taking,
Yeah.
looking at Buyer Street and Johnson, and now New Street is added to that list.
Right.
So those are the three primary focuses right now, and then I think we can explore after that, kind of what's next after those three areas are handled.
And I suppose one of the primary areas repaired just outside of the parking lot is, the question also is there an opportunity to have it less of a bottleneck? Because that's been, where the water comes downhill there, and that's, when it pushed up the floor of the parking garage that one time, and we fixed that. But I mean, is there a possibility in part of this repair to expand its capability to move water through? So it's all Wiley Wilson right now. So yeah, okay.
All these are.
Yes.
Yeah, and that,
These
getting
two
to that
weeks are-
point, I mean, for the parts underneath the street, I mean, we're essentially gonna be replacing the tunnel with a culvert, correct? We'll have to, and then we'll have to meet certain design standards like 10-year storm, so.
right, and of course, it's got to be, meet all the traffic rated requirements and everything as well, while figuring out what to do with the utilities. And one of the things I mentioned that Johnson Street's existing utilities and wanting to only do things once and improve flow, the hydraulic situation there with the flow is, for example, that water line, it's an aerial crossing through the tunnel. And so we're looking at, hey, can we relocate that while we're here? That's something that, would definitely be a better product at the end to do that. And we really only want to dig once.
Is that a restriction of flow, or is just a better placement?
But it is, it's below the ceiling.
Okay.
It's not like embedded. The duct bank was mostly, in Verizon I mentioned, that was mostly embedded in the entrance. It did project down a little bit, but the water line.
But what threats have we identified to private property, and how are we coordinating with those owners?
They've been notified. We notified and they've met with staff, so that's what we've done. And in the additional assessments, there weren't any, there was no reason to, there was no threat to private property or concern that they had on private property.
There are just so many unknowns. I just did want to express or reiterate that I think a lot of us are interested in seeing what some daylighting would look like. And looking at this as a, you know, an opportunity and realizing, of course, that it could be outrageously expensive and not feasible, but that it was something that I think most of us were interested in and at least seeing what that might look like.
It'd be, yeah, like,
Especially if we have to open it up to fix it.
Anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't put the top back up. Yeah. Yeah, but we understand it'd be a long,
Yeah,
multi-stage
clearly we ha-
process.
That's a very long process.
Yes, it's a long process, but something that we were all hoping to at least hear something more about. Yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Hart or Ms. Beauregard? Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mr. Hart. Thank you, Ms. Beauregard, for putting that together for us. And thank you, Mr. Mayo, and thank you, Jessica. I appreciate you reaching out to business owners and residents at the wharf. All righty. Ms. Beauregard, we have matters from the city manager. We have nothing
I don't
from the
have any other
city manager
matters.
this evening. Okay, it has been a
No,
long
it has
day.
been a
Everyone's had a
long week.
full work day and now we are at a full evening. So now is the part of city council's agenda entitled Matters from the Public. It is a time that council sets aside to hear from citizens and others about a wide variety of subjects. A copy of the Stanton City Council's matters from the public rules are available in paper form at the clerk's desk and online on the city council's webpage. You are asked to familiarize yourself with those rules before commenting. Please come to the podium or begin your call, identify yourself and complete your remarks within 5 minutes. As a reminder, this is a time for city council to listen. If you would like an answer to a question or a follow-up to your comment, please speak with the city manager, Leslie Beauregard, after the meeting. Would anyone like to please approach the podium? Mr. Kessiker, does anyone have their hand raised?
No, ma'am, we have no hands raised.
About that. All righty. Well, I'm not going to push the issue, but I did. But I do want to thank all of the staff who came out tonight. I just have to say, sheriff, deputy, chief deputy, deputy chief. I really wanted to say that. And all of the staff who came out tonight, you worked very hard on the budget with Ms. Beauregard and Ms. Moyers, and thank you all very much for being here, and all the rest of the staff, Mr. Knight, Mr. Blair, Ms. Kaufman, Mr. Kessiker. And thank you all citizens who come out and remain engaged. And for everyone who is listening and who is here and you have written emails, they have been read, and I will apologize again to anyone who has not received a response. But we really appreciate your civic engagement. So thank you all. And the meeting of Stanton City Council is adjourned.